Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been in a place so isolated that the absence of sound seems obscene? A place where the air thickens to the point that your very instincts want you to turn around and hightail it out of there? This is what the crazy mountains in Montana are like when these lights appear. Trust me, this lights phenomenon appears a lot more often than people want to believe. My name is Reed. I'm a hunting guide here in these mountains for 15 years. I have experienced things here that will make your blood run cold. Things that caused me to stop taking customers here in these mountains altogether. The problem is that no one will believe you until it occurs to them. Then it is too late to warn anyone else. It started in October of 2019. I was leading a small group up near Big Timber Creek, about 12 miles from the nearest logging road. 3 guys from out of state, all experienced hunters, all thinking they were going to bag a trophy elk. We'd been tracking a decent-sized bull for 2 days, camping in the high country, staying mobile. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, no wind, temperatures in the low 40s. Everything was going exactly as planned. Until the 3rd night. We'd set up camp in a small clearing surrounded by lodgepole pines about 9,800 feet up. I always pick spots with good visibility, multiple exit routes, and proximity to water. This one checked all the boxes. We had a fire going, dinner cooking, and everyone was in good spirits. The kind of night where you sit around swapping stories and enjoying the fact that you're miles away from civilization. Around 9:30 p.m., one of the guys, Marcus, stood up to grab something from his pack. He froze mid-step, staring up at the ridgeline to the north. Just stood there, arm extended, mouth slightly open. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. There was a light hovering above the ridge, not moving, not flickering. Just hanging there in the sky like someone had parked a miniature sun about 300 feet above the tree line. It was perfectly spherical, glowing with this intense white light that seemed to pulse very slightly, like it was breathing. But here's what made it wrong. It cast no shadows, none. The trees below it should have been lit up like it was noon, but they weren't. The light just stopped. Like it existed in its own little bubble of reality. "What the hell is that?" Marcus whispered. I didn't answer, because I'd seen it before. The other 2 guys, Tyler and James, were on their feet now too, all of us just staring at this thing. It had to be at least 2 miles away, but it looked massive. I've seen search and rescue helicopters, military flares, even the International Space Station passing overhead. This was none of those things. This was something else entirely. "Reed," Tyler said, quietly, his voice tight. "Reed, what is that?" "I don't know," I lied. "Probably some kind of atmospheric phenomenon, ball lightning or something." But even as I said it, I knew they didn't believe me. You can't look at something like that and think it's natural. Your brain rejects it on a fundamental level. The light stayed there for maybe 2 minutes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The fire crackled behind us, and somewhere far off, an owl hooted. Normal sounds. But they felt wrong against what we were seeing. Like the universe had glitched and 2 realities were overlapping. Then the light moved. It didn't drift or float. It shifted position instantaneously, appearing maybe a quarter mile to the east of where it had been. 1 second it was there, the next it was over there. No transition, no movement, just a jump in space. "Did you see that?" James breathed. The light jumped again, closer this time. then again. Each time it was getting nearer to our position, closing the distance in these impossible leaps that made your eyes hurt to follow. It was like watching a video game sprite teleport across the screen, except this was real, and it was coming toward us. "Pack up," I said. "Right now. Leave everything that's not essential." "What?" Marcus turned to me. "Read what now." Something in my voice must have convinced them. They started shoving gear into packs, moving fast but not quite panicking yet. I kicked dirt over the fire, which was probably stupid, but some part of my brain was screaming that we needed to hide, that we needed to be invisible. The light jumped again. It was directly above the tree line now, maybe a mile away. At this distance, I could see that it wasn't just a sphere. There was structure to it. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure, like looking at a 3D object that had more than 3 dimensions. It hurt to focus on it for too long, made your head feel fuzzy and disconnected. "Which way?" Tyler asked, pack on his back, rifle in hand. I pointed south away from the light. "Stay close. Don't run. Don't make noise. Just move." We started walking, pushing through the underbrush as quietly as we could manage. I kept glancing back over my shoulder, watching that thing hover above the trees. It had stopped jumping, just hung there, watching us. Or at least that's how it felt, like it knew we were there, like it was deciding what to do about us. We'd gone maybe 300 yards when Tyler grabbed my arm. Reed, stop." I turned to see what he was pointing at and felt my heart slam against my ribs. There was another light, directly in front of us, hovering above the path we'd been following. Same size, same impossible brightness, same wrong quality to it. We were surrounded. "What do we do?" Marcus whispered. His voice was shaking. "What the fuck do we do?" I didn't have an answer. Because in all my years in these mountains, in all the times I'd seen these things, I'd never been this close, never been trapped between them like this. The 2 lights began to move, not toward us, but toward each other, slowly converging above the forest canopy. As they got closer, the air around us started to change. It got colder, but not in a normal way. This was a cold that came from inside, like someone had injected ice water directly into your veins. The sounds of the forest cut off completely. No insects, no wind, no anything. Just our breathing, and the distant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I can't." James dropped to one knee, hand pressed against his temple. "Something's wrong. I can't think straight." Tyler was swaying on his feet, looking disoriented. Marcus had his eyes squeezed shut, muttering something under his breath that might have been a prayer. I felt it too, this pressure building inside my skull, like someone was inflating a balloon behind my eyes. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, and I could taste copper in my mouth. We needed to move. We needed to get out of here. But my legs felt like they were made of lead. The 2 lights met above us, merging into one larger sphere that pulsed with that same wrong light. And that's when things got really strange. The ground beneath us started to vibrate. Not shaking exactly. More like a deep, subsonic thrumming that you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. The trees around us began to sway, even though there was no wind. And the light above us was getting brighter, more intense, until it was almost impossible to look at directly. Then my radio crackled to life. That shouldn't have been possible. We were too far from any repeater towers, too deep in the mountains. The radios were just for communication within our group. But there it was, this burst of static that resolved into something that almost sounded like words. Not English, not any language I'd ever heard. But it had rhythm, cadence. It was trying to communicate something. "Turn it off," Marcus said. "Reed, turn it off." I fumbled for the radio on my belt, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I pressed the power button, held it down until the unit shut off completely. But the sound didn't stop. It was still there, coming from Tyler's radio, from James's radio, from somewhere in Marcus's pack. Then I realized it wasn't coming from the radios at all. It was coming from inside my head. And that's when I lost time. One moment I was standing there in the forest, my team around me, that thing hovering overhead. The next moment I was on my hands and knees in the dirt, throwing up bile, and the sun was starting to rise behind the mountains. 6 hours had passed. 6 hours that I couldn't remember. 6 hours that were just gone. I looked around frantically for the others. Tyler was sitting against a tree about 20 feet away, staring at nothing, his face completely blank. James was curled up on the ground near him, eyes open but not seeing anything. Marcus was nowhere in sight. "Tyler," I croaked, my throat raw. "Tyler, can you hear me?" He blinked slowly, like he was waking up from a deep sleep. "What? Where?" He looked down at his hands, then up at the sky, his expression confused. "What time is it?" "Almost dawn. Where's Marcus?" We found him an hour later, about a mile west of where we'd been. He was unconscious but breathing, lying on his back in the middle of a small clearing. No visible injuries, no sign of how he'd gotten there. When we finally managed to wake him up, he couldn't remember anything after the lights appeared. None of us could. We hiked out that morning, not speaking, not looking at each other. What was there to say? That we'd lost 6 hours? That something had happened to us that we couldn't explain or remember? That every instinct we had was screaming that we should never have survived the night? When we got back to my truck, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. All 4 of us had the same mark on the back of our necks. Small, perfectly circular, about the size of a dime. The skin was slightly discolored, like a very faint burn. They didn't hurt, didn't itch, just existed. Marcus noticed me staring at his neck. He reached back, felt the mark, and his hand froze. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," I said. And that was the truth. We drove back to town in silence. Tyler and James flew home the next day. Marcus stayed for 2 more days trying to make sense of what had happened, but eventually he gave up and left too. Before he did, he made me promise to never tell anyone what we'd seen. "They'll think we're crazy," he said. "They'll think we made it up or got high or something. It's better if we just forget about it." But you can't forget something like that. It changes you, makes you see the world differently, makes you realize that there are things out there that we don't understand, that maybe we're not supposed to understand. And those things are watching us. I stopped taking clients into that part of the mountains. Started turning down jobs that would take me above 9,000 feet. Made up excuses about game migration patterns, weather concerns, anything to avoid going back up there. Most of the other guides in the area thought I was losing my nerve, getting too old for the work. But then I started hearing stories. A Forest Service ranger named Colton told me about finding a hunting camp that had been abandoned in the middle of the night. Food still cooking over the fire, tents set up, gear scattered everywhere. But no people. They turned up 3 days later, wandering on a logging road 40 miles away, confused and disoriented, with no memory of how they'd gotten there. All of them had small, circular marks on their necks. A wildlife photographer named Sarah showed me pictures she'd taken from a ridge near Crazy Peak. Dozens of shots of the sunset, the mountains, the valley below. But in 3 of them, barely visible in the background, there was a light. The same wrong, impossible light I'd seen. She'd never noticed it while she was shooting. Only found it later when she was editing. And here's the disturbing part. Her camera's timestamp showed she'd taken all the pictures within a 20-minute window, but she remembered being on that ridge for at least 3 hours. A backcountry skier named Jake described waking up in the snow, his ski tracks leading in a perfectly straight line for over 2 miles, right up to where he'd collapsed. He didn't remember skiing that far, didn't remember anything after seeing something weird in the sky. He'd been missing for 14 hours, had nearly died from exposure. And yes, he had the mark too. The pattern was always the same. Strange lights, missing time, those circular marks, and nobody wanted to talk about it. Not officially. Not where it could be recorded or investigated. Because who would believe them? I started keeping a journal, documenting every case I heard about, every sighting, every incident. Marked them on a map, and a pattern emerged. All of them clustered around the same area. A rough circle, about 15 miles in diameter, centered on a specific ridge in the Crazy Mountains. A ridge that didn't have a name on any map, a ridge that local hunters and guides had started calling the Dead Zone, because nothing lived there. No game animals, no birds, not even insects. Just rocks and dead trees, and in silence that felt like pressure against your eardrums. And at night, if you were stupid enough to be nearby, you'd see the lights, hovering, watching, waiting. I tried to warn people, put up posts on hunting forums, talked to park rangers, even contacted a journalist who specialized in weird phenomena. But nobody took it seriously. They thought I was some crazy conspiracy theorist, or that I was trying to drum up publicity for my guide business. The journalist actually laughed at me, said if I wanted people to believe me, I should try to get video evidence. So I did. 3 months after my encounter with Tyler, Marcus, and James, I went back, alone, with a high-end video camera, a satellite phone, and enough supplies to last a week. I know, stupid decision, but I needed proof. I needed something tangible that would make people believe me, that would make them understand that something was happening in those mountains that couldn't be explained away. I set up base camp about 2 miles from where we'd had the encounter, close enough to get there quickly, far enough away that I might have warning if something approached. I'd learned a few things from talking to other people who'd had experiences in the area. The lights seemed to appear most frequently on clear nights with no moon. They avoided areas with a lot of radio traffic or electronic equipment, and they seemed to be more active during certain times of year. Late spring, early fall. Times of transition. It was now late September. Perfect conditions. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I stayed awake as long as I could, camera ready, scanning the ridgelines for any sign of activity. Nothing. Just normal mountain night sounds. Owls, coyotes in the distance, the occasional rustle of something moving through the underbrush. By the 3rd night, I was starting to think I'd wasted my time. Then, around 2:15 a.m., my electronics started acting weird. The camera's LCD screen began to flicker. My headlamp dimmed, even though I'd put fresh batteries in that afternoon. The satellite phone showed full signal 1 second, then no signal at all the next, then full signal again. And my watch stopped, just froze at 2:16 a.m. and wouldn't move forward. That's when I saw it. Not on the ridgeline this time, not hovering above the trees. It was in the valley below me, moving between the pines. A light, but smaller than the ones I'd seen before. About the size of a basketball, maybe. Weaving through the forest with purpose, like it was searching for something. I grabbed the camera and started recording. The LCD screen was still flickering, but I could see enough to know I was capturing footage. My hands were shaking so badly I had to brace the camera against a tree to keep it steady. The light moved closer. I could hear it now, that same subsonic thrumming that I remembered from before. It made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges, but I kept filming, Whatever happened, I needed this evidence. The light stopped about 50 yards from my position, just hung there in the air, hovering between two trees, pulsing very slowly. And as I watched through the camera's viewfinder, I noticed something I'd missed before. The light wasn't just bright. It was doing something to the space around it. The air looked distorted, like heat shimmer, but wrong, like reality itself was bending. Then it started to expand. The light grew larger, brighter, and the thrumming got louder. My camera's LCD screen went completely black. I pulled my eye away from the viewfinder to see if the camera was still recording, and that's when I realized. I couldn't move my head, couldn't look away from where the light was. It was like my neck muscles had simply stopped responding to my brain's commands. Panic set in. Real, genuine terror, because this was how it started last time. The paralysis, the pressure in my head, the sense that something was reaching inside your skull and rearranging things. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Tried to step backward, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could do was stand there and watch as the light grew brighter and brighter until it was all I could see, until the whole world was nothing but white light, and that impossible thrumming sound and the taste of copper in my mouth and the feeling that I was falling, even though I knew I was still standing still. Then everything went black. When I came to, it was dawn again. I was lying on the ground about 30 feet from where I'd been standing, the camera still clutched in my hands. Every muscle in my body ached like I'd run a marathon. My nose was bleeding, and I'd lost another 6 hours. I checked the camera immediately, hands shaking, dreading what I might find. The LCD screen flickered to life, and I pulled up the recording. It showed the forest, the light approaching, me trying to film it. And then, static, just pure white static for 6 hours and 42 minutes. Then the recording cut off. I scrolled back through, frame by frame, looking for anything, any detail I might have missed. And right before the static started, right at the moment I remember the light expanding, I saw something, just for a single frame, barely visible. A figure standing next to the light, tall and thin and completely motionless, like a shadow that had been cut out of reality itself. I stared at that frame for a long time, zooming in, trying to see more details. But the image quality broke down when you zoomed in too far. All I could make out was the basic shape. Humanoid, but wrong. Proportions that didn't quite match up. Arms that seemed too long. A head that was the wrong shape. I packed up camp immediately. Didn't even bother with most of my gear. Just grabbed the camera, the satellite phone, and started hiking out. I needed to get this footage to someone. A scientist, a researcher. Someone who could analyze it properly and confirm that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I got back to civilization and tried to show people the recording, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. The footage showed exactly what I remembered seeing. The forest, the light, me filming. But the frame with the figure? It was gone, just missing. Like it had been deleted. But I hadn't deleted anything. Hadn't even connected the camera to a computer. The timestamp showed that the file had been modified at 2:16 a.m., right when everything started, while I was still in the mountains, while I was unconscious or paralyzed or whatever had happened to me. Something had accessed my camera remotely and removed that single frame of footage. I tried to recover it using data recovery software. Nothing. The frame was gone completely, overwritten at the binary level. Professionally deleted, like it had never existed. That's when I started to realize the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just random encounters with strange lights. This was organized, deliberate. Whatever was in those mountains, it was aware of us. It was watching us, and it didn't want us to have proof. I talked to a few tech experts, showed them the corrupted file, asked if they could explain what might have caused it. They couldn't. The type of corruption was unlike anything they'd seen before. Not a hardware failure, not a virus, not magnetic interference. The data had been specifically targeted and erased in a way that should have been impossible without physical access to the camera's memory card. One of them, a guy named Rodriguez who worked in digital forensics, pulled me aside after looking at the file. "Read," he said quietly. "Whatever did this. It wasn't human. We don't have technology that can do this remotely. Especially not in the middle of nowhere with no internet connection. Either you're lying to me about where this happened, or what?" He didn't answer, just handed back my camera and told me to be careful. I went back to my cabin that night and did something I'd been avoiding. I pulled up my shirt and looked at my back in the mirror. The circular mark that had appeared on my neck after the first encounter had faded, but not completely. You could still see it if you looked closely. A perfect circle of slightly discolored skin. But now there was a second one. On my lower back, just above my left hip. Same size, same appearance. I didn't remember it being there before the solo camping trip. Didn't remember seeing it when I'd showered that morning before heading into the mountains. It had appeared while I was unconscious, while 6 hours of my life had been erased. I started having dreams after that. Vivid, disturbing dreams that felt more like memories than imagination. I'd dream about being in a room with curved walls, lying on something that might have been a table, bright lights above me, so bright I couldn't see anything else, and figures moving around the edges of the room, tall, thin figures that didn't move quite right. In the dreams, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only lie there and watch as those figures did. Something. I couldn't see what. The light was too bright, but I could feel it. A cold, clinical examination, like I was a specimen being studied. I'd wake up from these dreams with my heart racing, covered in sweat, that copper taste in my mouth. And every time, I'd check the marks on my skin, terrified that there would be new ones. So far, there haven't been. But I know it's only a matter of time. Other people started contacting me. People who'd seen my posts on hunting forums or heard about my experiences from mutual friends. They all had similar stories. Strange lights, missing time, marks on their skin, dreams that felt too real. And they all asked the same question. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. Because what do you do when faced with something you can't fight, can't understand, can't even prove exists? When the evidence gets erased? When nobody in authority will take you seriously? One woman, Lisa, told me she'd tried to go public with her experience. Contacted news stations, posted detailed accounts online, even tried to get in touch with government agencies that supposedly investigate UFO reports. Nothing. The news stations ignored her. Her online posts were removed by moderators who claimed they violated community guidelines. And the government agencies? They sent polite form letters thanking her for her report and assuring her it would be filed appropriately. Then silence. She showed me the marks on her skin. Not just one or two. Dozens of them covering her back, her legs, her arms. Some old and faded, some recent. It's been happening for 3 years, she said. Every few months, I'll lose time. Sometimes just a few hours. Sometimes a whole night. And afterward, there's always a new mark. Always the same size, same appearance. I've been to doctors, dermatologists. Nobody can explain them. Have you tried staying away from the mountains? I asked. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You think it matters? I moved to Billings, 200 miles away. It followed me. I moved to Seattle. Still happened. distance doesn't mean anything to them. Them? Whatever they are. Whatever's doing this. They're not bound by the same rules we are. Space, time, distance, it's all irrelevant. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was paranoid, that there had to be a rational explanation. But I couldn't, because deep down I knew she was right. A month later, I found out Lisa had disappeared. Her apartment was still full of her belongings. Her car was in the parking lot, but she was gone. The police treated it as a missing persons case, did all the usual investigations, and came up empty. No leads, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play. I tried to tell them about the lights, about the missing time, about the pattern of people disappearing from the Crazy Mountains area. They listened politely and then suggested I might want to talk to someone. A therapist, maybe. Someone who could help me process the stress of my job. They thought I was crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe all of this is just some elaborate delusion, and I need medication and therapy. But then, how do you explain the others? How do you explain dozens of people, all reporting the same phenomena, all with the same physical marks, all losing time in the same area? You can't. Not with conventional explanations. I've started carrying a gun when I go into the mountains now, not that I think it would do any good against something that can make you lose time, that can access your electronics remotely, that can move in ways that violate physics. But it makes me feel slightly less helpless. Last week, I got a call from a park ranger named Colton. We'd talked before, months ago, about the strange things happening in the Crazy Mountains. He'd been skeptical then, professionally polite, but clearly not buying it. Now his voice on the phone was different, shaken, scared. "Reed," he said, "I need to show you something. Can you meet me?" We met at a diner in Big Timber. Colton looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling slightly as he held his coffee cup. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video. It was dashcam footage from his patrol vehicle. Taken 3 nights ago, up on Forest Road 197. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The video showed a normal mountain road, illuminated by his headlights. Trees on both sides, gravel surface, nothing unusual. Then his radio cut out. You could see him reaching for it, trying to adjust the squelch. And that's when the light appeared. It came from above, descending rapidly, until it was hovering directly in front of his vehicle. The same impossible light I'd seen. The same wrong quality to it. The dashcam struggled to adjust to the brightness, the image washing out, then recovering, then washing out again. Colton's vehicle stopped. Not because he braked. You could see his foot was still on the gas pedal. The vehicle just stopped, like it had hit an invisible wall. The light hung there for maybe 20 seconds. Then it moved forward, passing directly over the hood of the vehicle. And as it did, every electronic system in the truck went haywire. The radio crackled with that same alien language I'd heard in my head. The dashboard lights flickered on and off in rapid sequence. Even the engine cut out completely. Then the light was gone, just disappeared. The video showed Colton sitting there completely still for almost 10 minutes. Not moving, not reacting, just staring straight ahead at nothing. Then he suddenly jerked, like someone waking from a deep sleep, looked around confused, started the engine, which worked perfectly now, and drove away. "I don't remember any of that," Colton said, putting his phone away. "I remember driving up the road. I remember my radio cutting out. Then, next thing I know, I'm driving down the same road 40 minutes later. I thought I'd just zoned out or something, lost track of time. But then I checked the dashcam footage and..." He rolled up his sleeve. There, on his forearm, was a circular mark. Same size as all the others, same appearance. "What the hell is happening, Reed?" "I don't know," I said. And I meant it. But it's getting worse, more frequent, more aggressive. We need to do something. Like what? We have no proof that anyone will accept. No resources, no support. What are we supposed to do? Colton leaned forward, his voice intense. We map it. Document every single incident we can find. Build a database. Look for patterns. Maybe if we can figure out what triggers these encounters, we can find a way to avoid them, or at least predict them. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. Better than sitting around waiting to be the next person who disappeared or lost time or woke up with new marks on their skin. We've been working on it for the past week. Colton has access to official incident reports through the Park Service. I have my network of guides, hunters, and locals who've had experiences. Between us, we're building a comprehensive picture of what's been happening in the Crazy Mountains over the past 5 years. The results are terrifying. We've documented over 200 separate incidents. Missing time, strange lights, electronic malfunctions, unexplained marks on skin, 200 incidents in 5 years in an area that's relatively sparsely populated. And those are just the ones people reported or were willing to talk about. How many more went undocumented? How many people had experiences they couldn't explain and just tried to forget about them? The pattern is clear. The incidents cluster around specific locations. The frequency is increasing. Each year, there are more reports than the year before, and the missing time episodes are getting longer. Used to be a few hours. Now, people are losing entire days. 3 nights ago, Colton and I drove up to one of the hotspot locations. Ridge near Crazy Peak, about 10 to 200 feet elevation. We set up equipment, cameras with backup power, radiation detectors, electromagnetic field sensors, anything we could think of that might give us data. We sat there from sunset until 3 a.m. Nothing happened. No lights, no strange phenomena. Just a cold, clear night in the mountains. As we were packing up to leave, Colton grabbed my arm. "Listen." I stopped moving, held my breath. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then I realized that was the problem. There was no sound, no wind, no animals, nothing. Just absolute, total silence. "We need to go," I said, "right now." We threw our gear in the truck and started driving down the mountain. Colton kept looking in the rearview mirror, his jaw clenched, knuckles white on the steering wheel. I kept my eyes forward, watching the road, trying not to think about what might be behind us. We made it about 2 miles before the engine died. The truck rolled to a stop on the gravel road. Colton tried to restart it. Nothing. Not even a clicking sound. Just dead silence. "Reed," he said quietly. "Look up." Above us, barely visible through the truck's windshield, was a light, not hovering, not moving, just there, watching us. I reached for the door handle, some stupid instinct telling me we needed to run. But my hand wouldn't move. Neither would my arm. Neither would any part of my body. The light descended. I woke up in the hospital in Big Timber. Afternoon sunlight was streaming through the windows. My head felt like someone had filled it with broken glass. Every muscle in my body ached, and I had absolutely no memory of how I'd gotten there. A nurse came in when she saw I was awake. She smiled, but it looked strained. "Mr. Reed, how are you feeling?" "What happened? Where's Colton?" "He's fine. He's in the room next door, actually. You two gave everyone quite a scare. A logging crew found you on Forest Road 197 this morning. You were both unconscious in your truck." "This morning? What time is it?" "About 2:30 p.m. I did the math in my head. We'd been on that road at around 3 a.m. That meant we'd lost over 11 hours this time. 11 hours that I couldn't remember at all. The nurse did some basic checks, asked me some questions, seemed satisfied that I wasn't going to die. A doctor came in later, ran more tests, and gave me the same diagnosis he'd apparently given Colton: severe dehydration, mild hypothermia, and possible carbon monoxide exposure. He recommended we rest for a few days and maybe consider getting our vehicle's exhaust system checked. I didn't argue. What was I going to say? That we'd been abducted by something that defied explanation? That we'd lost 11 hours to an encounter with whatever those lights were? He'd have kept me in the psych ward. Colton and I were released the next morning. We didn't talk much on the drive back to his place. What was there to say? We both knew what had happened, even if we couldn't remember the details. The marks on our skin told the story well enough. Both of us had 3 new ones. Perfect circles of discolored skin on our backs, arranged in a triangular pattern. "We need to stop," Colton said finally. "This is getting too dangerous. People are going to get hurt, or worse. People are already getting hurt. Lisa disappeared, remember? And she's not the only one. I've heard about at least 5 other people who've gone missing from this area in the past 2 years. No bodies, no evidence. Just gone. So, what do you want to do? Keep investigating until we end up the same way?" I didn't have an answer for that, because he was right. Every time we went up there, we were risking our lives. But at the same time, how could we just stop? How could we ignore what was happening? We agreed to take a break, put the investigation on hold for a while, focus on our regular jobs, try to live normal lives. It lasted about 2 weeks. Then a 16-year-old kid named Danny went missing. He'd been camping with his family in the crazy mountains near Half Moon Campground. Last seen around 10 p.m. when he went to his tent to sleep. When his parents checked on him the next morning, his sleeping bag was empty. Search and rescue teams combed the area for 3 days, brought in dogs, helicopters, volunteers. Found nothing, not a single trace. Until someone checked the kid's phone. His parents had turned it over to the police as part of the investigation. When they went through his photos and videos, they found something he'd recorded that last night. Timestamp showed 10:47 p.m. The video was short, only about 30 seconds, but it showed Danny filming through his tent's mesh window. "Do you guys see that?" he whispered to the camera. "There's something weird in the sky." The camera panned up, and even though the video quality was poor, you could see it clearly. A light hovering above the trees. The same impossible light that I'd seen multiple times. Danny filmed it for a few more seconds. Then the video went to static, just like my footage had. When it cleared again, the camera was pointed at the tent floor, and you could hear Danny's breathing. Fast, panicked breaths. Then the video cut off completely. The police shared the video with search and rescue teams, thinking it might help pinpoint his location. Instead, it just raised more questions. Questions they couldn't answer. Questions they didn't want to ask. But Colton and I knew what it meant. Danny had been taken, just like the others, and he probably wouldn't be found. We were right. 3 weeks later, the search was officially called off. Danny was presumed dead, though his body was never recovered. His parents held a funeral service with an empty casket. The local news covered it, talked about the dangers of camping in remote areas, reminded people to always tell someone where they're going. They didn't mention the video. They didn't mention the light. That information was quietly buried in the police report, where almost nobody would ever see it. I went to the funeral, so did Colton. We stood in the back, watching Danny's parents grieve for a son they'd never see again, a son who'd been taken by something nobody wanted to acknowledge existed. After the service, Colton and I drove back up to Half Moon Campground. We wanted to see the site ourselves, look for anything the search teams might have missed. We didn't expect to find Danny. We just needed to do something, anything that might make sense of what had happened. The campground was empty now. Yellow police tape still marked off Danny's family's campsite. We ducked under it and started looking around. The ground had been trampled by dozens of searchers, so any tracks were long gone. But we weren't looking for tracks, we were looking for evidence of them. The lights, the things that were taking people. We didn't find much. Some areas where the vegetation looked stressed or dead, which could mean anything. Some unusual electromagnetic readings on our equipment, but nothing conclusive. We were about to give up when I noticed something odd about one of the trees near where Danny's tent had been. The bark was marked, not with initials or graffiti, with symbols, perfectly geometric shapes, each about 2 inches tall, carved into the bark. They looked ancient, but when I touched them, the wood felt fresh, recently cut. "Colton," I called, "come look at this." He came over, studied the symbols, pulled out his phone to take pictures. "What language is this?" "I don't think it's any human language." We found more symbols on other trees around the campsite. Always at exactly eye level for someone about Danny's height. Always the same geometric shapes, arranged in different patterns. It was like something had been leaving markers, or messages. Colton traced one of the symbols with his finger. "This doesn't make sense. Why would they leave marks? What's the purpose? Maybe they're not trying to hide. Maybe they want us to know they're here." That thought haunted me for days afterward. The idea that this wasn't some covert operation, some secret abduction program. This was open, obvious. They were marking territory, claiming space, and there was nothing we could do about it. I started having the dreams again. More vivid this time. More detailed. I'd dream about being in that curved room, lying on the table, unable to move. But now I could see more. The walls weren't just curved. They had those same geometric symbols carved into them, glowing faintly with pale blue light. And the figures weren't just shadows anymore. I could see their shapes clearly. They were tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet, impossibly thin, like someone had taken a human shape and stretched it vertically. Their skin had a grayish tint to it, smooth and featureless. No hair, no visible ears or nose, just those large dark eyes that seemed to look right through you. In the dreams, they would move around the table, examining me, sometimes touching me with long, spindly fingers. Their touch was cold, not temperature cold, but a cold that went deeper than that, like they were drawing warmth out of my body, and they would communicate. Not with words, not with sounds, but directly into my mind. Thoughts that weren't mine, appearing in my consciousness. They were curious about us, about humans. They wanted to understand how we worked, how we thought, what made us different from them. But there was something else in those communications. Something darker. They were studying us, yes, but it wasn't purely academic. They had a purpose, an agenda, and whatever it was, I got the sense that it wasn't good for humanity. I'd wake up from these dreams with that copper taste in my mouth, sometimes with nosebleeds, always feeling like something had been taken from me. Not physically, something deeper, like they'd extracted bits of my consciousness, my memories, my very self, and taken them for study. Colton was having similar experiences. We'd compare notes over coffee, both of us looking increasingly haggard and sleep-deprived. He'd stopped showing up for work as regularly. I'd stopped taking clients completely. We were both becoming obsessed, consumed by this mystery that nobody else seemed to care about. "I think they're preparing for something," Colton said one morning. We were sitting in that same diner in Big Timber, going over our notes for the 100th time. Look at the pattern. 5 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 incidents per month. Now we're seeing 3 or 4 per week. The frequency is accelerating. Preparing for what? I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't think we have much time. He was right. Over the next month, the incidents increased even more. Lights were being seen almost nightly. People were losing time, some for hours, some for days. The marks on people's skin were getting more numerous, more complex, and more people were disappearing completely. The authorities couldn't ignore it anymore. Not when 24 people had gone missing from the same general area in less than a year. They brought in federal investigators, specialists in missing persons cases, organized massive search efforts, set up a command center in Big Timber, but they were looking in the wrong places, searching the ground when they should have been looking at the sky. Colton and I tried to tell them, showed them our evidence, our documentation, the patterns we'd found. They listened politely and then basically told us to stay out of the way. One investigator pulled me aside and suggested, not unkindly, that I was suffering from PTSD and needed professional help. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. But then, how do you explain the fact that every single missing person had been seen near those lights? How do you explain the electronic malfunctions? The marks? The missing time? You can't, not with rational explanations. 2 nights ago, Colton called me at 2 a.m. His voice was shaking. They're here. Right now. Above my house. I looked out my window. In the distance, I could see lights. Multiple lights, hovering above the town. Not trying to hide. Not staying in the remote mountain areas. They were here, among us, completely visible to anyone who bothered to look up. I'm coming over, I said. No. Don't. Just document this. Record it. People need to see. I grabbed my camera and started filming through the window. The lights were moving in formation, geometric patterns that shifted and changed. There had to be at least a dozen of them, maybe more. The largest one was directly over what I knew was Colton's neighborhood. My phone rang again. Colton. Reed, something's happening. I can feel it. That pressure in my head. I think they're coming for me. Get out of there. Get in your truck and drive. Can't move, can't. Reed, listen to me. If I don't make it, you have to keep going. You have to warn people. Make them believe. Promise me. Colton. The line went dead. I tried calling back. Nothing. Just went straight to voicemail. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and drove toward his house as fast as I could. But I knew I was already too late. I could feel it. When I got there, his truck was in the driveway. Front door was wide open. Lights were on inside. But Colton was gone. His phone was on the kitchen table, still warm. His wallet and keys were there too, but no sign of him. And on the wall, carved into the drywall with perfect precision, were those symbols. The same geometric shapes we'd seen on the trees, but these were glowing. Actually glowing with that same pale blue light I'd seen in my dreams. I took pictures of everything, documented the scene, called the police. They showed up, took statements, treated it like a break-in or possible abduction. They noticed the symbols, asked what they meant. I told them the truth. I don't know. But they're connected to all of this, to the lights, to the missing people. They didn't believe me. Filed it as another missing persons case, added Colton to the list of people who'd vanished from the Crazy Mountains area. That was 48 hours ago. I've been sitting in my cabin since then, going through all our research, all our documentation, trying to find something we missed. Some clue that might explain what's happening, what they want, why they're here. And I keep coming back to the same thought. What if we're not being abducted? What if we're being studied because they're planning something? What if all of these incidents, all of these disappearances, are just preparation for something much bigger? I don't have proof. I don't have answers. All I have is a mountain of documentation that nobody will take seriously, a body covered in unexplained marks and memories of encounters that shouldn't be possible. But I'm going back up there, to the dead zone, to that ridge where it all started. Because Colton was right about one thing. We're running out of time. The frequency of incidents is still increasing. More people are disappearing, and those lights are getting bolder, showing themselves more openly. If you're reading this, if you're hearing my story, I need you to understand something. This is real. It's happening. Right now, in the crazy mountains of Montana, something is taking people. Something that defies explanation. Something that our government either can't or won't acknowledge. And it's not stopping. I'm uploading all of our research to a private server. Location data, incident reports, photos, videos, everything. If I don't make it back from the mountains, someone needs to continue this work. Someone needs to warn people. Stay away from the crazy mountains at night. If you see strange lights in the sky, get somewhere populated as quickly as possible. If you start losing time, if you find marks on your skin, document everything. Keep records. You might not remember, but the evidence will be there. And most importantly, don't assume you're safe because you're not in the mountains. They're expanding their range, coming closer to populated areas. What happened to Colton proves that. Nobody is safe anymore. I'm leaving in an hour, taking all of our equipment, all of our research. If they're going to take me like they took Colton, like they took Danny and Lisa and all the others, then I'm going to make sure I get evidence. Real, undeniable proof that can't be dismissed or explained away. If you never hear from me again, you'll know why. You'll know that whatever is in those mountains got me too. But please, don't let our work die with us. Don't let people forget what's happening here. Because I'm convinced now that this is just the beginning. That the crazy mountains are just one location. That this is happening in other places too. Places where people aren't looking, aren't documenting, aren't paying attention. They're here. They've always been here, and they're not leaving. My truck's packed, cameras charged. I've written down everything I can remember, everything I know. Left copies with 3 different people I trust. If I don't check in within 48 hours, they'll know what to do with the information. The sun's setting now. Perfect time to start the drive up. The lights always seem to appear at night when it's dark, when they're harder to see clearly. But tonight, I'm ready for them. Tonight, I'm going to get the proof we need. One way or another, the truth is coming out. If you're listening to this, if you're hearing my story, take it seriously. Share it, spread it, make people aware. Because the worst thing we can do is pretend it's not happening. The worst thing we can do is stay silent. The lights are real, the abductions are real, and time is running out. I'm heading out now. Wish me luck. And if I don't make it back, remember us. Remember Colton. Remember Danny and Lisa and all the others. Remember that we tried to warn you. The truth is in the mountains, and tonight I'm going to find it, or die trying. You know that feeling when something's wrong but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? When every instinct in your body is screaming at you to turn around, but your brain keeps telling you there's a logical explanation? That's how it started for me, with a voice calling for help in a place where no voice should have been. My name's Elliot, and I work search and rescue in the crazy mountains. Have for 8 years now. I've pulled people out of crevasses, found lost hikers suffering from hypothermia, talked down climbers who got themselves stuck on cliff faces they had no business being on. I've seen a lot of things in these mountains, things that would make most people quit and find a safer job, but nothing prepared me for what happened last November. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, and we'd gotten a call about a missing hiker. Woman named Patricia Romano, 53 years old, experienced backcountry hiker. She'd gone out 2 days earlier for a solo trek and hadn't returned. Her husband had filed a missing persons report that morning when she didn't show up for work. I was paired with Mara, another SAR team member I'd worked with for 3 years. Good partner, calm under pressure, excellent navigator, and she had this weird ability to think like a lost person. Could almost predict where they'd end up based on their experience level in the terrain. We started at the trailhead where Patricia's car was parked. Standard procedure. Check the vehicle for clues, figure out what gear she'd taken, try to determine her intended route. Her husband had given us a rough idea of where she'd planned to hike, but in the crazy mountains, rough idea doesn't mean much. There are hundreds of unofficial trails, countless ways to get turned around, and the weather can change in minutes. She took a GPS, Mara said, going through the notes we'd gotten from the husband, which means she should have been able to find her way back even if she got lost. Unless the battery died or she dropped it, I finished. Or unless something else happened. We set out around 3 p.m. The sky was overcast, temperature dropping fast. Snow was forecast for that night, which meant we had maybe 4 or 5 hours of decent searching time before conditions got dangerous. Not a lot of time to cover the amount of terrain Patricia could have wandered into. We followed the main trail for about 2 miles, calling her name every few minutes, listening for responses. Nothing but wind and the occasional bird. Mara was scanning the ground for tracks, any sign that someone had passed through recently. The trail was mostly rock and packed dirt, not ideal for tracking, but she'd spot things I'd miss. Broken twigs, disturbed leaves, places where someone had stepped off the path. Around mile 3, she stopped. "Elliot, look at this." She was pointing to a spot where the trail forked. The main path continued east toward Crazy Peak. The smaller path headed north, winding up into a narrow valley that didn't really go anywhere useful, just dead-ended after a few miles at a steep rock face. "Boot prints," Mara said. "Fresh, maybe a day old, heading north. That doesn't make sense. The North Trail doesn't go anywhere. Why would she head that way? People get turned around. Maybe she thought it would loop back to the main trail." We followed the prints north. The valley narrowed as we climbed, steep walls of rock rising on either side. It was darker here, the overcast sky blocked by the valley walls, creating this premature twilight that made everything look shadowy and indistinct. The kind of place that makes you keep checking over your shoulder. We'd been following the trail for maybe 20 minutes when I heard it, a voice, distant, echoing off the valley walls, calling for help. I grabbed Mara's arm. "Did you hear that?" She nodded, already pulling out her radio. "Patricia? Patricia Romano, if you can hear me, keep making noise. We're coming to get you." No response. Just that same distant voice calling out again. It was hard to tell where it was coming from. The echo made it seem like it was everywhere and nowhere at once. "Northeast," Mara said, checking her compass. "Sounds bouncing around, but I think it's coming from up ahead." We picked up our pace, moving as quickly as we could over the rocky terrain. The voice kept calling. Irregular intervals, always that same word, help. But there was something off about it. The tone was wrong, too flat, too emotionless, like someone reading a script rather than genuinely calling for help. "Patricia," I shouted. "We're search and rescue. Keep talking so we can find you." The voice called again, but this time Mara stopped dead in her tracks. "That's not right," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" She held up her compass, tapped it, frowned. "The sound, it was coming from the northeast. Now it's..." She pointed. "Northwest, complete opposite direction. She's moving. Maybe trying to get to us. Maybe. But that would mean she moved about half a mile in 30 seconds, through terrain that would take us 15 minutes to cover." I listened to the voice call again. Mara was right. The direction had shifted. And now that I was paying attention, I noticed something else. The voice sounded exactly the same each time. Same tone, same pitch, same duration, like someone playing a recording. "This doesn't feel right," I said. "We should call it in. Get backup." Mara was already reaching for her radio when it happened. The air pressure changed. You know that feeling you get right before a severe thunderstorm? When the atmosphere gets heavy and thick and you can feel electricity in the air? It was like that, but worse. My ears popped, my vision blurred at the edges, and the voice called again, but this time it was coming from directly above us. I looked up. So did Mara. There was a light in the sky, not the sun, not a plane or helicopter, just a light hovering maybe 500 feet above the valley, perfectly still despite the wind. It was spherical, pulsing very slowly, casting this wrong light that didn't seem to reach the ground, and as we watched, it began to descend. "Run," Mara said, not shouted. Just said it calmly, like she was suggesting we head back for lunch, but I could hear the fear underneath. "Elliot, we need to run right now." We turned and started back down the trail, not sprinting because sprinting in the mountains gets you killed, but moving fast, pushing the limits of what was safe on the uneven terrain. Behind us, I could hear that voice still calling. Closer now. Much closer. I glanced back over my shoulder. The light had descended further, maybe 200 feet up now. And in the dim valley, I could see something that made my stomach drop. The light wasn't reflecting off anything. The rocks beneath it should have been illuminated, but they weren't. It was like the light existed in its own space, separate from our reality. "Don't look at it," Mara said. "Just keep moving." But I couldn't help it. I looked again, and that's when I saw the others. Smaller lights, maybe a dozen of them, emerging from the larger one. They spread out in a geometric pattern, moving in perfect synchronization, descending toward the valley floor. Toward us. My radio crackled. Static, then something else. That voice again, but distorted now, stretched out and wrong, not saying "help" anymore. Saying something else. Something that might have been words in a language I didn't recognize. "Elliot, the trail!" I looked forward just in time to avoid stepping off the edge of a drop-off. We'd reached the fork in the trail without realizing it. The main path back to the trailhead was to our right. But Mara had stopped, staring at her compass. "It's spinning," she said. "Elliot, the compass is just spinning. It won't hold direction." I pulled out my own compass. Same thing. The needle was rotating continuously, unable to find magnetic north. Our GPS units were dead, and my watch had stopped at exactly 4:47 p.m. "We need to keep moving," I said. "Forget the compass. We'll navigate by landmarks." But as I said it, I realized the problem. The valley looked different. The rock formations that I'd used to orient myself on the way up were gone. Or maybe we'd somehow gotten turned around and were in a completely different part of the mountains. Except that was impossible. We'd been on the same trail the entire time. The lights were getting closer. I could hear that subsonic thrumming now, the same sound that had been described in the reports I'd read but never believed. It made my teeth ache and my vision swim. Made me want to sit down and close my eyes and just wait for whatever was going to happen. Mara grabbed my arm, pulling me forward. "Come on, we can't stop." We stumbled down what we thought was the right trail, using the valley walls as guides, trying to ignore the lights behind us. The voice was still calling, but now it sounded like multiple voices, overlapping, creating this dissonant chorus that made it hard to think straight. That's when we heard the second voice. This one was different. Human. Real. Coming from somewhere ahead of us. "Help! Is someone there? Please, I need help." Mara and I exchanged looks. That was Patricia. Had to be. But after everything that had just happened, I wasn't sure if we should trust it. "Patricia Romano?" Mara called out. "Is that you?" "Yes." "Oh, thank God. I've been stuck here for 2 days. I think my ankle's broken." The voice was coming from the right, off the main trail, deeper into the valley. Away from the way we needed to go to reach safety. Away from the lights that were still descending behind us. "We need to make a choice," I said quietly. That could really be her, but it could also be, like the other voice, Mara finished, playing back something recorded, trying to lure us off the trail. The lights were maybe 100 yards behind us now. We could see them clearly, moving through the trees, that impossible light illuminating nothing. And ahead of us, Patricia's voice called again, more desperate now. "Please, I can see your lights. You're so close. Please don't leave me." But we didn't have lights. Our flashlights were off. We'd been trying to stay as invisible as possible. "That's not her," Mara said. "That's not Patricia. We need to go. Now." But even as she said it, I heard another sound. This one was unmistakable. Helicopter rotors, coming from the east, getting closer. Our backup finally arriving. Relief flooded through me. We weren't alone anymore. We had support. We could get out of this valley and figure out what the hell was happening from a safe distance. The helicopter sound got louder, closer. I could see navigation lights now, red and green, moving toward our position. Mara was waving her arms, trying to signal them. Then I noticed something wrong. The navigation lights were moving in impossible patterns, zigzagging, stopping mid-air, reversing direction instantaneously. No helicopter could move like that. "Mara," I said, "that's not a helicopter." She looked at the lights, and I saw the realization hit her. The rotor sound was continuing, getting louder, but it was coming from a different direction than the lights. And as we watched, the navigation lights began to change. They grew brighter, merged together, and formed another one of those spheres. The rotor sound cut off abruptly. The real helicopter, wherever it was, had lost power. Just like our electronics had. Just like our compasses had. "We're being herded," Mara said. "They're cutting off our exit routes, forcing us deeper into the valley." She was right. Behind us, the lights were blocking our retreat. To our right, that fake Patricia voice was trying to pull us off trail. And now, ahead of us, they'd created another barrier. The only direction we could go was left, deeper into the narrow section of the valley where the walls closed in, and the darkness was almost complete. "Your call," I said to Mara. "You're the better navigator. What do we do?" She studied the terrain, the lights, calculating odds and distances. "There's a climbing route on the south wall, about a quarter mile ahead. Class 3 scramble, nothing too technical. If we can reach it before those things cut us off, we might be able to get high enough that they can't follow. And if we can't..." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew what happened to people who got caught by those lights. Missing time. Unexplained marks. Sometimes they disappeared completely. We started moving again. Faster now, taking risks on the uneven ground. The lights behind us matched our pace, maintaining the same distance, like they were toying with us, like they wanted us to run. The valley narrowed further. The walls were maybe 30 feet apart now, towering above us on both sides. It was darker here, the kind of darkness that feels solid and oppressive. Our flashlights barely penetrated it, the beams seeming to die after just a few feet. "There!" Mara pointed to a section of the south wall where the rock was broken and jagged. "That's the road. We can climb that." But between us and the climbing route, standing in the middle of the trail, was a figure. It looked human at first glance, standing upright, about 6 feet tall, wearing what might have been hiking clothes. But the proportions were wrong. Arms too long. head slightly too large. And it wasn't moving, just standing there perfectly still like a statue. "Patricia," I called out, even though I knew it couldn't be. The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there watching us with what might have been eyes but were too dark to see clearly in the dim light. Mara grabbed my arm, pulling me backward. "Don't get close to it. Whatever that is, it's not human." The figure took a step toward us, then another. Its movement was wrong, too smooth, like it was gliding rather than walking. And as it got closer, I could see that its face was blank. No features at all, just smooth skin where there should have been eyes, nose, mouth. We backed away, keeping our flashlights trained on it. Behind us, the lights were getting closer. We were trapped between them and this thing, in a narrow section of valley with no easy way out. "The wall," I said. "We're going to have to try climbing. It's our only option. Not enough time. That thing's between us and the route. Then we go through it." Mara looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was, but I'd rather take my chances with one entity than a dozen of those lights. At least this thing was solid, physical, something I could potentially fight or push past. "On 3, I said. "We rush it. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just get to that wall and start climbing. Elliot, 1. The figure took another step closer. I could see details now that made my skin crawl. Its clothing wasn't clothing. It was part of it, like the texture had been painted onto smooth skin. And its hands. Its hands had too many fingers. 2. The lights behind us brightened. The thrumming got louder. I could feel that pressure building in my head again, that wrongness that made me want to collapse. 3! We ran straight at the figure. I don't know what I expected to happen. For it to grab us, maybe. To fight back. But it did something worse. It stepped aside, just moved out of the way and let us pass. And as we ran by it, it turned its blank face to follow our movement. Watching, studying. We reached the wall and started climbing. The rock was loose, unstable, but we didn't care. We just needed to get higher, to put distance between us and whatever was happening in the valley below. Mara went first, finding hand and footholds, calling them out to me. I followed, trying not to think about the fact that we were climbing in near darkness with unknown entities below us. 20 feet up, 30. My arms were burning, fingers cramping, but I kept going. Below us, I could see those lights spreading out, illuminating the valley floor in that wrong way that cast no shadows. And standing in the middle of them, looking up at us, was the figure, still motionless, still watching. "Keep climbing," Mara said from above me. "Don't look down." 40 feet, 50. The rock was getting worse here, crumbling under our weight. I heard Mara dislodge something, and a basketball-sized rock tumbled past me, bouncing off the wall and disappearing into the darkness below. I didn't hear it hit bottom. 60 feet. 70. My legs were shaking from exertion. We'd been climbing for maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. The lights below were brighter now, and I could hear new sounds. Mechanical sounds, like gears turning or metal scraping against metal. Not sounds that should exist in nature. "Elliot, there's a ledge up here. Big enough for both of us. We can rest." I pulled myself up onto the ledge, gasping for breath, and collapsed next to Mara. For a moment, we just lay there, lungs burning, muscles screaming. Then slowly, carefully, I looked over the edge. The valley below was completely illuminated now. Not by normal light, but by that impossible glow from dozens of those spheres. And in the light, I could see things that made my mind struggle to process what my eyes were showing me. The valley floor had changed. Where there should have been rock and dirt and scattered vegetation, there was something else. Geometric patterns, perfectly symmetrical, covering the ground. And those figures, dozens of them now, moving in coordinated patterns, like they were following choreography only they could hear. "What the hell are they doing?" I whispered. "I don't know, but we're not staying here to find out. Come on, we need to keep climbing." We continued up the rock face, slower now, more careful. The handholds were scarcer here, the rock more vertical. Several times I thought I was going to fall, caught myself at the last second, felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Below us, the lights began to rise, slowly, methodically, ascending toward our position. "They're coming up," I said. "Mara, they're following us. Almost there. I can see the ridge. Maybe another 20 feet. 20 feet might as well have been 20 miles. The rock face here was nearly vertical, smooth in places where the stone had been worn by wind and weather. I didn't know if we could make it, but the alternative was to sit here and wait for those lights to reach us. I found a handhold, pulled myself up, and felt the rock crumble under my fingers. I slipped, caught myself on a small outcropping, felt it start to give way. Below me, the lights were maybe 30 feet away now, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from them. Not normal warmth, a cold warmth, if that makes sense. Heat that felt wrong. "Grab my hand." Mara was lying flat on the ridge above me, arm extended down. I reached up, caught her wrist, felt her grip tighten. She pulled, I pushed with my legs, and suddenly I was over the edge, rolling onto solid ground, gasping and shaking. "Move!" Mara shouted, and we scrambled backward from the edge just as one of those spheres rose above the ridgeline. It hung there for a moment, pulsing, that wrong light washing over us. And then, without warning, it shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. The other lights followed, one by one, rising into the darkness until there was nothing left but the natural night. The thrumming stopped. The pressure in my head released, and just like that, it was over. We sat there on the ridge for a long time, neither of us speaking, both of us trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, Mara pulled out her radio. It crackled to life immediately. "Base, this is Mara. Do you copy?" "Mara? Jesus, where have you been? You've been off radio for 3 hours. The helicopter had to turn back because of equipment failure. We've got teams mobilizing to come find you." 3 hours. We'd entered the valley at around 4 p.m. Now, according to my watch, which had started working again, it was 7:15 p.m., but it had only felt like 45 minutes. We didn't tell them what we'd seen, not right away. What were we supposed to say? That we'd been chased by mysterious lights? That we'd seen a faceless figure in the valley? That time had somehow slipped away from us? They'd think we were suffering from altitude sickness or hypothermia, or had gotten into some bad mushrooms. So we stuck to the basic facts. We'd followed Patricia's trail into the valley. We'd encountered difficult terrain. Our electronics had malfunctioned. We'd climbed out and were now on the ridge, safe but exhausted. The retrieval team met us 2 hours later. By then, we'd made our way down to a more accessible area. They gave us water, checked us for injuries, asked if we'd found any sign of Patricia. We told them about the boot prints heading north, about hearing a voice calling for help, about how we'd lost the trail in the dark. All true, just not the complete truth. They pulled us out that night, said they'd continue the search for Patricia at first light, weather permitting. We were debriefed back at base, filled out incident reports, and were told to go home and rest. Mandatory 2-day break before we could go back out. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights, heard that voice echoing through the valley, felt that pressure building in my head. And I kept thinking about Patricia. Was she still out there? Had she encountered the same things we had? Or was that voice we'd heard, was that actually her, somehow recorded and played back by whatever those things were. The next morning, I got a call from Mara. Meet me at the diner on Main Street. 30 minutes, don't tell anyone. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back booth, 2 cups of coffee on the table. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. I went back, she said without preamble. This morning, before sunrise. Back to that valley. Are you insane? We're on mandatory leave. If they find out, I had to see it in daylight, had to confirm what we saw was real and not just, I don't know, stress-induced hallucination or something. She pulled out her phone, showed me photos. The valley in early morning light, the rock walls, the trail we'd followed, everything looked normal, ordinary, like any other valley in the crazy mountains. Where are the patterns? I asked. The geometric shapes on the valley floor. Gone. Like they were never there, but look at this. She swiped to another photo, close-up of the ground. And there, barely visible in the dirt, were marks, depressions in the soil, arranged in that same geometric pattern we'd seen. They're shallow, Mara said. Maybe a 1/4 inch deep. You wouldn't notice them unless you were specifically looking. But they're there, Elliot. Proof that something happened. Did you find Patricia? She shook her head. No sign of her. No tracks, no gear, no indication she was ever in that valley. But I did find something else. She pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a piece of metal, about the size of a quarter, perfectly circular. The surface was smooth, reflecting light in a way that seemed wrong, like it was absorbing light and reflecting something else back. I found 3 of these, scattered around the valley floor, near where those figures were standing. I don't know what it is. Some kind of alloy, maybe, but it's not natural. I took the bag, held it up to the light. The metal had a slight iridescence to it, colors shifting as I moved it. And when I held it for too long, I started to feel warm. Not on my skin. Deeper, like the warmth was coming from inside my hand. We need to have this analyzed, I said. Find out what it's made of. Already thought of that. I know a guy at Montana State works in their materials science lab. I'm driving up to Bozeman this afternoon. Want to come? We made the 2-hour drive in relative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Mara's contact was a professor named Dr. Harrison, a materials engineer who'd apparently helped her identify strange rocks she'd found on previous SAR missions. Dr. Harrison was in his 60s, white hair, thick glasses, wearing a lab coat covered in chemical stains. He took the metal sample, examined it under a magnifying glass, and frowned. Where did you say you found this? In the mountains, Mara said vaguely. Why? Because this is, unusual, very unusual. He carried it over to a spectrometer, ran some tests, studied the readout on his computer screen. The composition is strange, primarily titanium, but there are trace elements I can't identify, elements that aren't appearing in my database. What do you mean, aren't in your database? I asked. I mean, the spectral signature doesn't match any known element, which should be impossible. We've mapped the entire periodic table, unless... He looked at us over his glasses. Unless this is some kind of alloy that's been engineered at the atomic level. Military application, maybe. Or aerospace. Where exactly did you find this? Just in the mountains, Mara repeated. We thought it might be from an old plane crash or something. If it's from a plane crash, it's not from any plane I know about. This is advanced materials science, cutting edge. Maybe even beyond cutting edge. He handed the sample back to her. I'd recommend you turn this over to the authorities. If it's military, they'll want it back. And if it's not military, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. We left the lab and sat in Mara's truck in the parking lot. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence. We need to go back, to the valley, find out what's really going on. Mara, we're SAR, not investigators. This is out of our league. We should report what we found. Let someone else handle it. Report it to who? The police? The Forest Service? They'll think we're crazy. Or worse, they'll take this seriously and shut down the entire area. Cordon it off, conduct their own investigation, and we'll never know what actually happened. Maybe that's for the best. She turned to look at me. Patricia is still missing, Elliot. Whether she encountered what we encountered or just got lost in the mountains, she's still out there. And if those things had something to do with her disappearance, we need to know. We need to find her. She was right, and I knew it. But that didn't make me any less terrified of going back into that valley. We spent the rest of the day doing research. Hit the local library, went through old newspaper archives, searched online forums. We were looking for any other reports of strange phenomena in the crazy mountains. Missing persons cases, unexplained lights, anything that might connect to what we'd experienced. What we found was disturbing. Over the past 15 years, 12 people had gone missing in the crazy mountains. Some were eventually found, usually confused and disoriented with no memory of where they'd been. Others were never found at all. And in several cases, the search teams had reported equipment malfunctions, compass anomalies, and strange atmospheric conditions. One report from 2016 caught my attention. A hunting guide named Reed had claimed to see lights in the mountains, had documented missing time, had tried to warn people about something happening up there. I recognized the name. He'd been relatively famous in this AR community, known for his tracking skills and wilderness knowledge. But after his reports, people had stopped taking him seriously. Thought he'd lost it, developed some kind of paranoid delusion. We should talk to him, Mara said. See if his experiences match ours. We found his cabin the next morning. It was isolated, about 10 miles outside of Big Timber, at the end of a dirt road that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. His truck was in the driveway, but when we knocked, nobody answered. The door was unlocked. We went in. Probably shouldn't have, but we were desperate for information, and found the cabin abandoned, not recently. There was dust on everything, mail piled up on the table, food rotting in the refrigerator. But the walls were covered in documentation, maps with marked locations, photos of lights in the sky, incident reports, news clippings about missing persons. And there, in the center of it all, was a large map of the crazy mountains with dozens of pins marking specific locations. He was tracking it, Mara whispered. Tracking the pattern. All the pins were clustered around one area, a valley, the same valley where we'd had our encounter. There were notes, too, written in increasingly erratic handwriting. Observations about the lights, about time distortions, about people who'd gone missing. And one note, circled multiple times in red ink. They're not random. They're searching for something, or someone. The last entry in his journal was dated 3 weeks ago. Going back to the dead zone tonight. Final expedition. If I don't return, all my research is documented here. Please, make people believe, make them understand what's happening. Reed hadn't returned. We checked the local news, called the sheriff's office. He'd been reported missing 2 weeks ago. Search efforts had been called off after finding no trace of him. He went there alone, I said. Went into that valley, and whatever took the others took him too. Mara was studying the map, tracing the locations with her finger. All the disappearances, all the sightings. They cluster around a specific section of the valley, about 2 miles from where we encountered those lights. And according to his notes, there's something at the center, some kind of focal point. You're not seriously suggesting we go there. We have to. Patricia might still be alive. Reed might still be alive. If there's any chance we can help them, we'd be walking into a trap. You saw what happened last time. We barely escaped. Last time we were unprepared. We didn't know what we were dealing with, now we do. We can plan better, bring better equipment, set up safety protocols. I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in her eyes. She was going, with or without me, and I couldn't let her go alone. We spent the next 2 days preparing, bought radiation detectors, electromagnetic field meters, high-powered flashlights, climbing gear, emergency beacons. Mara even got her hands on some military-grade communication equipment, the kind that supposedly couldn't be jammed. We told our supervisor we needed a few days off for personal reasons. Didn't mention where we were going or what we were doing. If this went wrong, I didn't want the SAR team coming in after us and potentially getting caught by whatever was in that valley. We went in on a Thursday morning, early, before sunrise. The forecast was clear, no storms expected. We parked at the same trailhead where Patricia's car had been found, which was still there, gathering dust and bird droppings. "Last chance to back out," Mara said as we geared up. "If I was going to back out, I wouldn't have driven all the way here. Let's just do this before I change my mind." We hiked in at dawn, the rising sun painting the mountains in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful morning. Peaceful. No indication of the nightmare that was waiting deeper in the mountains. We reached the valley entrance around 8 a.m. Everything looked normal in daylight. Just another valley, steep walls, narrow path, scattered vegetation. But I could feel it. That wrongness. Like the air itself was thicker here, harder to breathe. "Equipment check," Mara said, pulling out her various devices. "Radiation detector, normal background levels. EMF meter, wait." She adjusted the meter, tapped it. "Elliot, I'm getting readings. High electromagnetic field levels, way higher than normal. Could be natural. Mineral deposits, magnetic rocks. Could be. But look at the pattern." She showed me the meter. The readings weren't random. They pulsed in a regular rhythm like a heartbeat. On for 3 seconds, off for 2 seconds, on for 3, off for 2, over and over. "That's not natural," I said. We continued deeper into the valley, following the same trail we'd taken before. Mara was documenting everything, taking photos, recording EMF readings, noting locations on her GPS. All the equipment was working fine now. Whatever had interfered with our electronics last time wasn't active. Or maybe it was just sleeping. We found the climbing route we'd used to escape, saw our boot prints still visible on the lower sections, saw the rocks we'd dislodged lying at the base. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. Except the ground. The geometric patterns were gone, like Mara had said, but when we examined the soil closely, we could see those shallow depressions, perfectly arranged, mathematically precise. "What do you think made these?" I asked. "I don't know, but whatever it was here recently. Look." She pointed to one of the depressions. Inside it, the soil was darker, slightly melted, like something very hot had pressed into the ground. These weren't made by natural pressure, these were burned in. We followed the patterns deeper into the valley, toward the area Reed had marked as the focal point on his map. The EMF readings got stronger as we went, the pulse becoming more rapid, and that feeling of wrongness intensified. Every instinct was telling me to turn around, to leave, to get as far from this place as possible. But we kept going. The valley narrowed to maybe 15 feet wide. The walls here were sheer and smooth, like they'd been carved by machines rather than erosion. And at the end, blocking our path, was a wall of rock. Natural dead end. except it wasn't natural. Up close, I could see marks on the wall. Not erosion, not weathering. Precise cuts, forming shapes and symbols. The same geometric patterns we'd seen on the ground, but carved into solid rock. "Mara," I said quietly, "we need to document this and leave. Right now." But she was already approaching the wall, running her hand over the symbols. "These are old, really old, but they've been maintained. Some of the cuts are fresh. How is that possible? This place is in the middle of nowhere. Who would come all the way up here to carve symbols into rock? Not who. What?" The EMF meter was screaming now, pegged at maximum. The radiation detector was clicking, not dangerously high, but definitely elevated. And my watch had stopped again, frozen at 10:23 a.m. "We need to leave," I said, "right now. Wait, look at this." At the base of the wall, partially hidden by fallen rocks, was an opening. Small, maybe 3 feet high and 2 feet wide, like a natural cave entrance, or something that was meant to look like a natural cave entrance. Mara pulled out her flashlight, shined it into the opening. The light didn't penetrate far, getting swallowed by darkness after just a few feet. "We're not going in there," I said. "Just a quick look, see how far it goes." "Mara, this is insane. This is how people die in horror movies." "This isn't a horror movie. This is real, and Patricia might be in there." She was right. If there was any chance Patricia was alive, if she was trapped somewhere in this mountain, we had a responsibility to find her. But every cell in my body was screaming at me not to go into that opening. Mara made the decision for both of us. She got down on her hands and knees and crawled into the darkness. I waited for about 10 seconds, listening to her move through the tunnel, hearing her grunt as she squeezed past narrow sections. Then I heard her voice, distant and echoing. "Elliot, you need to see this, right now." I crawled in after her, flashlight clutched in one hand, the other hand feeling along the tunnel walls. The rock was smooth, almost polished. Not natural. This had been shaped by something. The tunnel descended at a steep angle, getting narrower, until I was barely able to squeeze through. My heart was hammering, breath coming in short gasps. I've never been claustrophobic, but this was testing my limits. The weight of the mountain pressing down above me, millions of tons of rock held up by nothing but this small tunnel. Then the tunnel opened up. I emerged into a chamber. Not large, maybe 20 feet across, perfectly circular. And the walls were covered in those symbols, thousands of them, carved into the rock with incredible precision, glowing very faintly with pale blue light. Mara was standing in the center of the chamber, slowly turning, taking it all in. "What is this place?" "I don't know. But we need to document it and leave." She pulled out her camera, started taking photos. The flash seemed wrong in here, too bright, creating shadows that didn't quite line up with where they should be. That's when I noticed the floor. It wasn't rock. It was something else, smooth and dark, almost like polished metal. And when I knelt down to touch it, it was warm. "Mara, this isn't natural. None of this is natural." "I know. Then let's get the documentation and go." But as I said it, I heard something. A sound from deeper in the chamber, from a section I hadn't noticed. Another opening, another tunnel, leading further down into the mountain. And from that tunnel came a voice. "Help!" Not the wrong voice from before. Not the emotionless recording. This was a real human voice, weak, desperate, genuine. "Please, I need help." Mara and I locked eyes. We both knew we should leave. We both knew this could be a trap. But that voice was real. Someone was down there. Someone needed help. "Stay here," I said. "I'll check it out." We should stay together. If something happens, one of us needs to be able to get back out and call for rescue." She didn't like it, but she nodded. I approached the second tunnel, shined my light down it. It descended steeply, maybe at a 60-degree angle. Rough, more natural looking than the first tunnel. I started down, bracing myself against the walls, moving slowly. Every few feet, I'd stop and listen. The voice called again, closer now. "Help, please, I can't move." The tunnel leveled out, opened into another chamber, smaller than the first, and darker. My flashlight beam swept across the space and stopped on a figure huddled against the far wall. Patricia. It had to be. She was wearing hiking clothes, had her backpack next to her, looked dehydrated and exhausted, but alive. I rushed over, knelt beside her. "Patricia Romano, I'm with Search and Rescue. We're going to get you out of here." She looked at me with unfocused eyes. "The lights? Did you see the lights?" "Yes. We saw them. How long have you been down here?" "I don't know. Days, maybe a week. I can't tell. They took my watch, took my phone. I tried to leave, but I can't find the way out. The tunnels keep changing." "What do you mean, changing?" "They move, the openings. One minute there's a tunnel, the next minute it's just solid wall. I've been going in circles. I thought I was going to die down here." I helped her to her feet. She was weak, could barely stand. "Can you walk?" "I think so. Just slowly." We started back toward the tunnel I'd come through, but when we got there, Patricia stopped. "That's not right," she said. "That tunnel wasn't there before. It's how I got down here. It leads back to the chamber where my partner is waiting. No, I've been through every tunnel in this place. That one wasn't there 10 minutes ago." A cold feeling settled into my stomach. I pulled out my radio, tried to call Mara. Static. Just pure static. "Mara, do you copy?" Nothing. We started up the tunnel anyway. What choice did we have? It was the only way out. But as we climbed, I noticed something wrong. The tunnel was longer than I remembered, much longer. I'd only descended maybe 30 feet to reach Patricia. But we'd been climbing for several minutes and still hadn't reached the first chamber. "Something's wrong," Patricia whispered. "This is what happened before. The tunnels change. They trap you." I kept climbing, helping Patricia, refusing to panic. But the tunnel just kept going, and going, and going, until finally it opened into a chamber. But not the chamber I'd left. This one was different, larger, and the walls were covered in something that definitely wasn't rock. It looked like circuitry, intricate, complex, running across the walls and ceiling in patterns that hurt to look at. And it was active, lights pulsing through it, that same blue glow we'd seen on the carved symbols. "Oh God," Patricia said, "this is where they took me. This is where they do it." "Do what?" But I didn't need her to answer, because in the center of the chamber, I could see them. The tables, 3 of them made of that same smooth dark material, and on one of the tables, perfectly still, was a figure. Mara. I ran to the table, grabbed Mara's shoulders, shook her. "Mara, wake up!" She didn't respond. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, but they weren't seeing anything. And she had marks on her skin now, not the circular ones I'd heard about in other cases. These were different. Lines, branching out from her neck down her arms, glowing with that same faint blue light. "What did they do to her?" I shouted at Patricia. "What the hell is this place?" "I don't know. When they brought me here, I saw things, not human, moving around, touching those panels on the wall. I think this whole chamber is some kind of machine." "How did you get away?" "I didn't. They let me go, put me in that tunnel and just left me there, like they were done with me." I checked Mara's pulse. It was there, but slow, too slow, and her skin was cold to the touch, like she'd been in here for hours even though I'd only been gone for maybe 10 minutes. The lines on her skin pulsed. Once, twice. Then her eyes closed and she gasped, a huge shuddering breath like someone who'd been underwater too long. "Elliot?" Her voice was weak, confused. "What? Where am I?" "We're getting you out of here. Can you sit up?" She tried, managed to get upright with my help. She looked at the lines on her arms, touched them with trembling fingers. "What are these?" "I don't know. But we need to move. Right now." I helped her off the table. She was unsteady, leaning heavily on me, but she could walk. Patricia was already moving toward the tunnel we'd come through, but I grabbed her arm. That tunnel changed once already. It might not lead out. Then what do we do? Stay here and wait for those things to come back? Good point. We didn't have many options. So we went back into the tunnel, moving as quickly as we could with two people who could barely walk. The tunnel ascended steeply, forcing us to climb in some sections. Mara was getting stronger as we went, like whatever had been done to her was wearing off. The lines on her skin were fading too, still visible, but dimmer now, less defined. "Do you remember what happened?" I asked her as we climbed. "I was in the first chamber. You went down the tunnel to investigate the voice. I was taking photos, documenting the symbols. Then," she frowned. "Then, I heard something behind me. I turned around, and there was light, so bright I couldn't see. And then, nothing, blank. Next thing I know, you're shaking me awake. You lost time. How long?" I checked my watch, still stopped at 10:23. "I don't know, mine's not working." We kept climbing. The tunnel twisted and turned, branching off in places, forcing us to make choices about which direction to go. I tried to mark our path by leaving pieces of torn cloth from my jacket at each intersection, but I wasn't confident it would help. If Patricia was right about these tunnels changing, we might end up somewhere completely different anyway. After what felt like an hour of climbing, we emerged into another chamber. Not the one we'd entered through. This one was bigger, dome-shaped, with a circular opening in the ceiling that let in natural light. Real sunlight, not that wrong light from the spheres. "There," Patricia pointed. "That's the way out." The opening was about 15 feet above us, but there were handholds carved into the wall. Or maybe they'd always been there. Natural rock formations that just happened to be perfectly spaced for climbing. Either way, it was our exit. I went first, testing each hold, making sure it would support our weight. The rock was solid. Real. After all the wrong surfaces and impossible geometry, touching normal rock felt like coming home. I pulled myself through the opening and found myself on a hillside I didn't recognize. Not the valley we'd entered, not anywhere near it. This was a completely different part of the mountains. I could see peaks in the distance that I knew, could orient myself by them. We were about 5 miles east of where we'd started. 5 miles. Through maybe 200 yards of tunnels. I helped Patricia up, then Mara. We all sat there on the hillside, breathing in fresh air, feeling real sunlight on our faces. For a few minutes we didn't speak. Just sat there, grateful to be alive. Finally, Mara broke the silence. "We need to report this." "Report what?" I said. "That we found impossible chambers inside a mountain? That we saw technology that shouldn't exist? That we all lost time in different ways? They'll think we're insane." "We have evidence. The photos I took, the EMF readings, the radiation data." She pulled out her camera, turned it on. The display showed corrupted files. Every photo she'd taken in the chambers was gone, replaced by static or solid colors. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. I saw the photos. They were clear. They were perfect." Patricia pulled out a small digital camera from her pack. I took pictures too, when I was trapped down there, before my battery died. She turned it on, scrolled through the images. Empty, all of them deleted. We checked Mara's equipment. The EMF meters, radiation detectors, all of them had been reset. No data stored. Nothing to prove we'd recorded anything unusual. They erased it, Mara said. Whatever those things are, they accessed our equipment remotely and erased the evidence. Then we tell them what we saw, detailed descriptions. We're credible witnesses, SAR team members. They have to take us seriously. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Without evidence, we were just 3 more people with a crazy story about lights in the mountains. We hiked out that afternoon, navigating by landmarks and my compass, which was working perfectly now. It took us 4 hours to reach a Forest Service road where we could call for pickup. The debriefing was rough. We had to explain where we'd been, why we'd gone in without authorization, what we'd found. We told them about Patricia, about finding her in the caves, about getting turned around in the tunnel system. All true, just not the complete truth. We left out the lights, the chambers, the technology that shouldn't exist, the time distortions. Patricia backed up our story, said she'd gotten lost in a tunnel system, had been wandering for days before we found her. Medical examination showed she was dehydrated and malnourished, consistent with being lost for several days. But she had those marks too. Faint lines on her skin, barely visible, but there if you looked closely. And when the doctors asked about them, she said she didn't know. Must have scraped herself on rocks while trying to find her way out. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was the victim. We were the heroes who'd found her. Everyone was happy with the outcome. Except us. Mara and I met up 3 days later, after we'd both been cleared to return to work. We sat in her truck, parked at a scenic overlook, staring at the crazy mountains in the distance. "What do we do?" she asked. "Just pretend it didn't happen? What choice do we have? We have no evidence, no way to prove what we saw." Patricia remembers. She could corroborate our story. She's not going to. I talked to her yesterday. She wants to forget the whole thing ever happened. Move on with her life. And honestly, can you blame her? Mara was silent for a long time. Finally, she pulled something out of her pocket. One of those circular pieces of metal we'd found in the valley. She'd kept it, hidden from the debriefing team. "This is real," she said. "Whatever happened down there, whatever we saw, this is physical proof it exists. And what are we supposed to do with it? We already tried having it analyzed. The results were inconclusive. Then we keep it safe, document everything we remember, and we watch. Because if it happened to us, if it happened to Patricia and Reed and all those other people, it's going to happen again." She was right. And over the following weeks, we started to see the pattern. More disappearances in the crazy mountains. More reports of equipment malfunctions, strange lights, missing time. The incidents were increasing in frequency, getting bolder. And we started to notice something else. The people who'd had encounters and survived, they all started showing up in the same places. At support groups for people with unexplained experiences. At UFO conferences. Online forums dedicated to alien encounters. They were searching for answers, just like us, trying to make sense of what had happened to them. Mara and I reached out to some of them, carefully, discreetly, not identifying ourselves as SAR team members. We shared our stories, compared notes, looked for commonalities. The pattern was consistent. Lights in the sky, time distortions, electronic malfunctions, marks on skin. And for those who'd been taken inside, memories of chambers and technology and beings that didn't quite look human. We compiled everything into a database. Names, dates, locations, descriptions. Built a comprehensive map of incidents going back 20 years. And what we found was terrifying. The activity wasn't random. It was organized, systematic, like something was conducting a long-term study of a specific area and the people who entered it. And the incidents were accelerating. In the past year alone, there had been more reported encounters than in the previous 5 years combined. Whatever was in those mountains, it was getting more active, more aggressive, more visible. 3 months after our encounter, Mara got a call from a woman named Jennifer. She'd been hiking in the Crazy Mountains 2 weeks earlier, had seen lights, lost 6 hours, woke up in a different location with no memory of how she got there. A standard pattern. But Jennifer had something none of the others had. She'd been wearing a body camera, one of those small action cameras that hikers use to document their trips. And she hadn't thought to check the footage until just now. "You need to see this," she said. "I need someone else to confirm I'm not losing my mind." We met her at a coffee shop in Livingston. She showed us the footage on her laptop. It started normal. Hiking footage, mountain scenery, her narrating her route. Then the camera started to glitch. Static, distortions. And then a light, just for a few frames, but visible, undeniable. Hovering above the trees exactly as we'd described. Then the footage cut out. When it resumed, Jennifer was walking down a trail she didn't recognize, clearly confused and disoriented. The timestamp showed 6 hours had passed. "This is it," Mara said. "This is the proof we need." "I've made copies," Jennifer said. "Stored them in multiple locations, cloud storage, physical drives, sent them to people I trust. If something happens to me, if this footage gets erased like everyone else's evidence, there are backups." We started reaching out to others who'd had experiences. Told them about the body camera footage, encouraged them to document their own encounters, to create redundant backups of any evidence they collected. Some of them listened, started carrying cameras, recording devices, anything that might capture proof of what was happening. And occasionally, they'd get something. A few seconds of usable footage, a clear image of a light, electronic readings that couldn't be explained. It wasn't much, but it was something. Slowly, carefully, we were building a case that couldn't be dismissed. Then, 2 weeks ago, everything changed. Mara called me at 2 a.m., her voice shaking. "Elliot, they're back. At my house, the lights are back. Get out of there. Get to somewhere public, somewhere with lots of people." "I can't move. I'm trying, but it's like last time, the paralysis. Oh God, Elliot, I can see them. They're in my yard. They're..." The line went dead. I drove to her house immediately, doing 90 on mountain roads, not caring if I got pulled over. When I got there, her door was wide open, lights on inside. But Mara was gone. Her equipment was still there. Computer, files, all her research. But Mara had vanished. I called it in immediately. Search teams mobilized within hours. We searched her property, the surrounding woods, every inch of terrain within a 5-mile radius. Found nothing. No tracks, no signs of struggle, no indication of where she'd gone. Just like all the others who disappeared. The police treated it as a possible abduction. Asked about enemies, recent relationships, anyone who might want to harm her. I told them everything I could about her recent activities, her CR work, her research. I left out the lights, the encounters, the chambers beneath the mountains, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. And even if they did, what could they do about it? It's been 2 weeks now, no sign of Mara, no leads, no evidence, just another person who vanished from the Crazy Mountains area without a trace. I've taken over her research, compiled all her notes, all the witness statements, all the evidence we'd collected. I'm maintaining the database, reaching out to new witnesses, documenting every incident. And I'm planning one more trip into those mountains. to the valley, to the chambers, because I think I know what they want. What they're looking for in all the cases we documented, all the people who'd been taken or experienced missing time, there was one commonality. Everyone had been alone or isolated from others when it happened. The times when people were taken from groups, it was always one person at a time, separated from the others. They're selective, careful. They don't want confrontation, don't want multiple witnesses who can corroborate each other's stories. But what if we gave them what they wanted? What if someone went in there willingly but equipped with every recording device we could get our hands on? Cameras, audio recorders, GPS trackers, everything broadcasting to remote storage in real time? We might lose the person, probably would, but we'd get the evidence. Undeniable, documented proof of what's happening in those mountains. I volunteered, made my peace with the fact that I might not come back. But if I can get one clear image, one piece of footage that can't be dismissed or explained away, it'll be worth it. The lights are real. The chambers are real. Whatever's taking people from the crazy mountains is real. And it's time everyone knew it. I'm going in tomorrow night. Alone, just like they want. But this time, I won't be defenseless. I'll have cameras mounted on my helmet, my chest, my backpack. Audio recorders. Everything broadcasting via satellite uplink to servers in 3 different states. If they take me, if they erase the local storage like they've done before, it won't matter. The data will already be elsewhere, already backed up, already beyond their reach. Jennifer is coordinating everything from off-site. She's been through this, knows what to expect. She'll monitor the feeds, watch for the moment when things start to go wrong. And when they do, she'll make sure the evidence gets to people who can do something about it. Media outlets, scientists, government agencies, everyone who needs to see it. I'm not naive enough to think one incident will change everything. People will still doubt, will still look for conventional explanations. But it'll be a start, a crack in the wall of skepticism. And maybe, just maybe, it'll help us find Mara, find all the others who've disappeared, because I don't think they're dead. I think they're somewhere, in those chambers, or beyond them, or in some space that exists parallel to our own reality. I think they're being studied, observed, maybe even kept alive for ongoing examination. And if there's any chance of getting them back, any hope of rescue, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. So I'm going in tomorrow night. Full moon, which according to our data is when activity peaks. I'll hike to the valley, enter the chamber, and wait for them to come. And when they do, the world will finally see the truth. I'm leaving this document with Jennifer. If I don't return within 48 hours, she's been instructed to release it along with all our research. Names, dates, locations, witness testimonies, everything we've compiled over the past months. The truth is coming out, one way or another. To anyone who's experienced something similar, who's had encounters they can't explain, who's lost time in the mountains or seen lights in the sky, you're not alone, you're not crazy. What you experienced was real. And we're going to prove it. The crazy mountains are hiding something. Something that's been there for a long time, operating in secret. Taking people and erasing evidence and counting on the fact that nobody would believe the few survivors who tried to speak out. But that ends now. Watch the news tomorrow night. Watch for reports of unusual activity in the Crazy Mountains area. Watch for footage that shouldn't exist, showing things that shouldn't be possible. Because whatever happens to me, whatever they do, the evidence will survive. The truth will get out. The lights are real. The abductions are real. And tomorrow night, the world is going to see proof. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the lights, not of what they might do to me. I'm afraid of what happens if we do nothing, if we let this continue, if we allow people to keep disappearing without anyone knowing why or how. So, I'm taking a stand, making a choice, going into that valley one more time, but on my terms, not as a victim, as a witness, as documentation. And if I don't come back, if this is my last entry, I want you to know, it was worth it. Every moment of fear, every sleepless night, every terrifying encounter. Because the truth matters. People need to know what's happening in those mountains. They need to know that we're not alone, that something else shares this world with us. Something that doesn't play by our rules, doesn't respect our boundaries, and has been operating in our backyard for who knows how long. Tomorrow night, that changes. Tomorrow night, we fight back. Stay safe, stay aware. And whatever you do, stay away from the crazy mountains after dark. Unless you're ready to see the truth for yourself. The lights are waiting, and so am I. You ever see something so impossible that your brain just refuses to accept it? Where you're standing there watching it happen right in front of you, but some part of your mind is screaming that it can't be real. That's what it felt like watching that light split into 3 pieces and then merge back together. Like reality itself was breaking apart and reassembling wrong. I'm Jace, and I'm a wildlife photographer. Been doing it for 12 years, specializing in nocturnal animals and landscapes. The crazy mountains in Montana are one of my favorite locations. Remote, beautiful, full of subjects that most people never get to see. I've spent hundreds of nights out there, camping under the stars, waiting for the perfect shot of an elk at dawn, or a mountain lion prowling through moonlit snow. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains had to offer. I was wrong. It was mid-September, prime time for capturing early season snow on the peaks with autumn colors still visible in the valleys below. I'd brought my girlfriend Talia with me. She's a videographer, does nature documentaries, and we'd been planning this trip for months. 5 days in the backcountry, just us and our cameras, documenting the transition from summer to fall. We set up our base camp about 8 miles in from the nearest trailhead, at the edge of a small alpine lake. Perfect location. 3 60-degree views, good water source, far enough from any trails that we wouldn't see other hikers. Talia wanted to capture time-lapse footage of the stars, and I was hoping to get some shots of the northern lights if we got lucky with solar activity. First 2 days were perfect. Clear skies, good weather, amazing shots. We documented a black bear fishing in the lake, got footage of a golden eagle hunting marmots, captured sunrise over Crazy Peak that looked like something out of a fantasy painting. Everything was going exactly as planned. Third night, things changed. We'd just finished dinner around 8:30 p.m. and were setting up our equipment for the night shoot. Talia had 3 cameras positioned around the campsite, all set to record time-lapse. I had my main rig on a tripod, pointing toward the northern horizon where I was hoping to catch some aurora activity. The forecast showed good geomagnetic conditions, and the sky was perfectly clear. "How long do you want to run the time-lapse?" Talia asked, adjusting one of her camera settings. "At least 6 hours. If we're lucky, we might get some serious light show action around midnight. I'm setting mine to run all night. Full battery should last until dawn." We got everything positioned, started the recordings, and settled in by the fire with some coffee. It was cold, maybe low 40s, but we were dressed for it. The kind of night where you appreciate the warmth of a good fire and the companionship of someone you care about. Around 10 p.m., I noticed something odd. The fire was flickering strangely, like it was reacting to wind, but there was no wind. The air was completely still, and the sounds of the forest had stopped. No insects, no distant animal calls, just silence. You feel that? Talia asked quietly. Yeah, something's off. We both stood up, looking around, trying to figure out what had changed. That's when I saw it. A light in the sky about 45 degrees above the horizon to the north. Not a star. Not a plane. It was too bright, too steady, and it was moving. Talia, are your cameras running? All three, why? Because I think we're about to document something interesting. The light was getting brighter as it approached. It had to be maybe 10 miles away, moving slowly and deliberately across the sky. No sound, no navigation lights, just this intense white glow that seemed to pulse very slightly, like it was breathing. That's not a plane, Talia said, reaching for her main camera. That's not anything I've ever seen. I was already behind my tripod, adjusting settings, making sure I was capturing this. The light continued its approach, and as it got closer I could see more details. It wasn't a single point of light, it was spherical, maybe 50 feet in diameter if I was judging the distance correctly. And the glow wasn't uniform. There were patterns within it, geometric shapes that shifted and reconfigured. Are you getting this? I asked. Every second, Jace, what is that thing? I don't know, but keep filming. The sphere stopped about 2 miles from our position, hovering perfectly still above the lake. And that's when it happened. The thing that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. The sphere began to elongate, stretching horizontally, like someone was pulling it from both sides, and as it stretched, it started to brighten, getting more and more intense until I had to stop looking directly at it. The light was physically painful, even from 2 miles away. Then it split, not gradually, not like something tearing apart. It just suddenly became 3 separate spheres, arranged in a perfect triangle formation. Each one identical to the original, each one glowing with that same impossible light. Did you see that? Talia whispered. Please tell me your camera caught that. I saw it. I don't believe it, but I saw it. The 3 spheres hung in the air for maybe 30 seconds, maintaining perfect formation. Then they started to move, rotating around a central point that wasn't there, like they were orbiting an invisible anchor. Faster and faster, until they were just streaks of light forming a circle in the sky. And then they merged back into one. One moment, 3 separate objects. The next, a single sphere again. Like nothing had happened. Like the laws of physics were just suggestions that could be ignored when convenient. Jace, Talia said, her voice shaking slightly. Tell me you're still recording. Everything. I'm getting everything. The reunified sphere started to move again, this time heading east, parallel to the mountain range. We watched it until it disappeared behind a ridge, maybe 5 minutes of total observation time. Then it was gone, and the normal sounds of the forest returned. Insects started chirping again. An owl hooted in the distance. Everything went back to normal, like those 5 minutes had been extracted from reality and then reinserted. We stood there in silence for a long time, both of us processing what we'd just seen. Finally, Talia spoke. We need to check the footage. We pulled up the recordings on her laptop, which she'd brought for backing up files. Her 3 time-lapse cameras had all been running, covering different angles of the sky. We reviewed the footage from the camera that had been pointed in the direction of the sphere. The first few hours showed normal star movement, time-lapse compression making them streak across the sky in elegant arcs. Then, at approximately 10:03 p.m., according to the timestamp, the sphere appeared. But here's where it got weird. On camera, the sphere wasn't the bright white light we'd seen with our eyes. It was recorded as pure white overexposure. The entire frame washed out, nothing visible except blinding white. For the entire time it was in view, the camera captured nothing but white screen. "That's not possible," Talia said. "These cameras have incredible dynamic range. They should be able to handle bright lights without completely blowing out the image. Check the other cameras." She pulled up the footage from her second camera, which had been pointed slightly off angle. Same thing. Pure white overexposure the moment the sphere appeared in frame. The third camera, pointed the opposite direction and catching the sphere's reflection in the lake, showed the same thing. "My camera," I said, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Check my stills." I'd been shooting in continuous mode, capturing frames every 3 seconds throughout the entire event. We pulled up the files. Same issue. Every single shot that contained the sphere was completely overexposed. Just white. Nothing salvageable. "This doesn't make sense," Talia said. "We both saw it clearly. We saw details, saw it split into 3 pieces, saw it merge back together. But none of that is on camera. How is that possible?" "I don't know, but I know what we saw, and we both saw the same thing, which means we weren't hallucinating." We stayed up most of the night, reviewing and re-reviewing the footage, hoping to find something we'd missed. But there was nothing. Just those overexposed frames, useless for proving what we'd witnessed. Around 3 a.m., exhausted and frustrated, we finally decided to try to get some sleep. But as I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling of the tent, I couldn't stop thinking about that sphere, about the way it had split and merged, about how the light had affected our cameras in a way that shouldn't be possible. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I must have eventually dozed off because I woke up to Talia shaking my shoulder. Sunlight was streaming through the tent fabric. Morning, except Talia's face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "Jace, you need to see this, right now." I followed her out of the tent. The campsite looked wrong. It took me a moment to figure out why. Our cameras, all of them were gone. My main camera, Talia's 3 time-lapse cameras, even her backup camera that she'd left in her pack. All missing. What the hell? I checked my camera bag. Empty, except for lenses and accessories. When did this happen? How did someone take them without us hearing anything? That's not the worst part. She pointed toward the lake. On the shore, arranged in a perfect triangle, were 3 circles burned into the ground. Each one, maybe 3 feet in diameter. The vegetation within them completely incinerated. The soil beneath fused into something that looked like glass. And in the center of the triangle, right where the cameras had been positioned, was our equipment. Not stolen. Relocated. Placed carefully in a pile, completely intact. We approached slowly, neither of us wanting to touch anything. The cameras were there, but they'd been modified. That's the only word I can think of. They looked the same, but wrong. The lenses had a strange rainbow sheen to them, like oil on water. The camera bodies felt different, heavier, like the materials had been altered at some fundamental level. "Don't turn them on," I said. "Not yet. We need to document this first." But Talia's phone was dead. So was mine. Fully charged the night before, now completely drained. No power at all. Wouldn't even show the charging screen when we connected them to our portable battery packs. "This is insane," Talia said. "This is absolutely insane. What happened here?" I think we were visited again while we were sleeping, and they took our cameras, did something to them, and brought them back. Why? What's the point? I didn't have an answer for that. We spent the next hour documenting everything we could with our emergency camera, a cheap point-and-shoot that I keep in my first aid kit for accident documentation. Got shots of the burned circles, the strange sheen on our camera lenses, the general layout of the site. Then, carefully, we tried turning on the modified cameras. They worked. Powered up normally, screens displayed correctly, all functions seemed operational. But when we tried to review the footage from the previous night, we found something that made my skin crawl. The overexposed white frames were gone, replaced with footage that showed the sphere in perfect clarity. Every detail visible, every geometric pattern within the light captured in stunning resolution. We could see the split, see the 3 separate spheres, see the merger. All of it crystal clear. But we hadn't shot this footage. The cameras had been recording pure white overexposure. We'd verified that before going to sleep. Someone or something had gone into the files and replaced them with what we'd actually witnessed. "This is proof," Talia said quietly. "This is actual, undeniable proof of what we saw. Or it's proof that something can manipulate our equipment and our recordings without us knowing, which is somehow more terrifying." We backed up the files immediately, multiple copies on multiple drives, and started packing up camp. Neither of us wanted to spend another night out there. Whatever was happening in these mountains, we'd gotten more documentation than we'd bargained for. The hike out took most of the day. We moved quickly, keeping to the trail, not stopping except when absolutely necessary. The entire time I had this feeling of being followed, not by anything I could see or hear, just a presence, a sense that we weren't alone. We made it back to the trailhead around 6 p.m. Our truck was still there, thankfully, and we threw our gear in the back and started the drive to the nearest town. Neither of us spoke much. We were both processing, trying to make sense of what had happened. We checked into a motel in Big Timber, got a room with Wi-Fi, and immediately started uploading the footage to cloud storage. Multiple services, multiple accounts, creating backups of backups. If something happened to the physical drives, if the files got corrupted or deleted, we wanted redundant copies. The upload took hours. We ordered pizza, barely ate it, just sat there watching the progress bars climb. Finally, around midnight, everything was uploaded, secured, distributed across the internet where nobody could erase it all. "What do we do with this?" Talia asked. "Who do we show it to?" "I don't know. Scientists, astrophysicists, someone who can analyze it and tell us what we're looking at? What if they don't believe it's real? What if they think we faked it with CGI or something? We have the original files, complete with metadata showing they were shot on our cameras at that location on that date. That should count for something." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. People fake things all the time. And our story, about cameras being modified overnight by unknown entities and footage being replaced with clear documentation, sounded completely insane. We slept for maybe 4 hours, neither of us really resting, both of us jumping at every small sound. In the morning, we started making calls, contacted a physics professor at Montana State, sent the footage to a data forensics expert, reached out to a few people we knew in the documentary film community who'd done work on unexplained phenomena. Most of them were skeptical but intrigued. The physics professor wanted to examine our cameras, see if he could figure out what had caused the lens modifications. The forensics expert agreed to analyze the files, verify they hadn't been digitally altered. The documentary people wanted to interview us, get our testimony on record. 3 days later, the physics professor called with his initial findings. "These cameras," he said slowly, like he was choosing his words carefully, "they've been exposed to something, some kind of intense electromagnetic radiation, but not any form I recognize. The sensor arrays have been permanently altered at the molecular level. They shouldn't work at all, but they do, and they're actually more sensitive now than they were before." What does that mean? I honestly don't know. I've never seen anything like this. I'd like to run more tests, but I need to be honest with you. I'm not equipped to fully analyze this. You need someone with access to better equipment. Maybe NASA, maybe one of the national labs. The forensics expert had similar findings. The footage was genuine, not CGI or digitally manipulated. The metadata was consistent, timestamps aligned with our story. But there were anomalies in the files. Data structures that didn't match normal camera output. It was like the files had been created by something that understood how digital video worked, but implemented it slightly wrong. It's like looking at a really good counterfeit, he explained. Everything's there, everything looks right, but there are tiny inconsistencies that suggest the files were created by something other than your cameras. Yet the cameras definitely recorded them. It's paradoxical. Talia and I spent the next week reaching out to various organizations. Sent the footage to NASA's Unexplained Phenomena Division. Contacted the FAA. Even reached out to some private UFO research groups, though we were skeptical of their credibility. Most of them were interested. Some wanted to investigate further, but nobody could give us answers. Nobody could explain what we'd seen or what had happened to our equipment. Then we started hearing about others. An astronomer in California had captured similar footage through his telescope. A sphere of light that split into multiple pieces and reformed. His equipment had been modified too, sensors altered in ways that shouldn't be possible. A commercial pilot reported seeing the same phenomenon while flying over Montana. Filed an official report with the FAA. Other pilots in the area confirmed the sighting. A team of researchers studying atmospheric phenomena had documented 3 separate instances of spheres splitting and merging, all in the same general area. The Crazy Mountains. There was a pattern. Something was happening in that mountain range. Something that was becoming harder and harder to ignore or explain away. 2 weeks after our encounter, Talia and I were contacted by a researcher named Dr. Patricia Vance. She was an astrophysicist at Caltech who'd become interested in unexplained aerial phenomena after her own sighting several years earlier. She'd been quietly collecting reports, analyzing footage, trying to find patterns in the chaos of UFO sightings and strange light phenomena. "Your footage is the clearest I've seen," she told us over video call. "Most recordings are grainy, ambiguous, easily dismissed, but yours shows distinct details, the geometric patterns within the light, the way it splits with mathematical precision. This is significant." "Can you tell us what it is?" I asked. "No, but I can tell you what it's not. It's not any known aircraft, not any atmospheric phenomenon we've documented. Not ball lightning, not aurora, not reflections or lens flares. This is something else entirely." "So what do we do with this information?" Dr. Vance was quiet for a moment. "That's complicated. If we go public, there will be attention, a lot of attention. Your lives will change. You'll be subject to scrutiny, skepticism, possibly ridicule. The footage will be analyzed and reanalyzed, and even if it's proven genuine, many people will still refuse to believe it." "But people need to know," Talia said. "If something's out there, if something's visiting these mountains and modifying equipment and potentially interacting with humans, people have a right to know." "I agree. But we need to be strategic about how we present this. Build a comprehensive case with multiple witnesses, multiple data points, multiple forms of evidence. Your footage is crucial, but it's not enough on its own." She connected us with other witnesses, the astronomer in California, a meteorologist who'd tracked unusual radar returns over Montana, a Forest Service employee who'd found strange burn marks in the mountains similar to what we'd photographed. All of them had pieces of the puzzle. None of them had the complete picture. Over the next month, we compiled everything into a comprehensive report. Hundreds of pages of witness testimony, technical analysis, photographic evidence, video documentation. Dr. Vance coordinated with other scientists, presenting our findings at closed-door symposiums, building support within the academic community. The response was mixed. Some scientists were fascinated, eager to investigate further. Others were dismissive, unwilling to stake their reputations on something so controversial. A few were hostile, accusing us of perpetuating pseudoscience and wasting valuable research time. But slowly, momentum built. More witnesses came forward. More footage emerged. The phenomenon was becoming harder to deny. Then, in late October, something happened that changed everything. Talia and I had returned to the Crazy Mountains, against our better judgment, but we needed more footage, more evidence. Dr. Vance had provided us with specialized equipment, spectrum analyzers, radiation detectors, high-speed cameras capable of capturing thousands of frames per second. If the phenomenon appeared again, we'd document it in unprecedented detail. We set up camp in a different location this time, higher in the mountains, on a ridge with clear views in all directions. The equipment was positioned strategically, overlapping fields of view, redundant coverage. If anything appeared, we'd capture it from multiple angles with multiple sensors. First night was uneventful. Second night, the equipment started showing anomalies. Electromagnetic readings spiking for no apparent reason. Background radiation fluctuating. Temperature dropping rapidly despite no weather change. "It's happening again," Talia said, checking her monitors. "Whatever causes this, it's starting." We activated all cameras, started recording on every device. The sky was clear, stars visible, no moon. Perfect conditions for observation. The sphere appeared at 11:47 p.m. Not from the horizon this time. It just suddenly existed, maybe 300 feet directly above us. One moment, nothing. The next moment, a glowing sphere the size of a house, hovering in perfect silence. "Are you getting this?" I asked, not taking my eyes off it. "Every camera, every sensor, we're documenting everything." The sphere pulsed, once, twice, then it began to split, but not into 3 pieces like before. This time it divided into 7 separate spheres, each one smaller than the original, arranged in a perfect heptagonal formation. The 7 spheres started to rotate, slowly at first, then faster. As they picked up speed, they began to change color. White to blue, to green, to red, to purple, cycling through the spectrum in synchronized flashes. And with each color change, our equipment went haywire. Cameras malfunctioned, displays showing static, radiation detectors pegging at maximum. The spectrum analyzer couldn't keep up with the readings, showing values that shouldn't be possible. "Jace, look at the ground." I tore my eyes away from the sky. The vegetation around our camp was moving, not swaying like wind, actually moving, grass and plants bending toward the center of our site like they were being pulled by invisible strings. Then, my body felt it. That pulling sensation, like a gentle pressure trying to lift me off the ground. Not strong enough to move me, but unmistakable. A force acting on my entire body simultaneously. "We need to move," I said. "Get away from directly under it." We backed away from the camp, keeping our eyes on the spheres above. They were spinning faster now, creating a solid ring of colored light, and the pulling sensation got stronger. Small objects around the camp started to rise. A water bottle, Talia's notebook, a package of trail mix, all floating up toward the ring of light. Then the spheres stopped spinning. Hung there, 7 distinct objects again. And simultaneously they all shot beams of light downward. 7 pillars of white light, perfectly straight, terminating at the ground in circles maybe 2 feet in diameter. Where the light touched the ground, the soil started to glow. That same rainbow sheen we'd seen on our camera lenses. The ground itself becoming iridescent, like it was being transformed into something else. "This isn't observation," Talia whispered. "This is interaction. They're doing something to the environment." The beams held for maybe 15 seconds. Then they cut off. The spheres merged back into one, and the single sphere shot straight up into the sky, accelerating so fast it was gone in less than a second. We stood there in shocked silence. Then, slowly, we approached the spots where the light beams had touched down. The ground was still glowing faintly, the rainbow effect slowly fading. I knelt down, careful not to touch it directly, and held out the radiation detector. The readings were insane. Not dangerous, apparently, but well above background levels. And the patterns were wrong. Radiation doesn't pulse. It doesn't show geometric patterns in intensity. But that's exactly what the detector was showing. "We need samples," Talia said. "Soil, vegetation, whatever we can safely collect." We spent the next hour carefully gathering samples, documenting everything with our emergency cameras since our main equipment had been fried by whatever had just happened. The specialized gear Dr. Vance had provided was completely dead. Sensors blown, circuits melted, storage drives corrupted. But we had the samples, physical evidence of whatever interaction had occurred. We hiked out at first light, neither of us willing to spend another night in those mountains. The drive back to civilization was tense, both of us hyper-aware of every light in the sky, every shadow that moved wrong. We shipped the samples to Dr. Vance's lab via overnight courier, along with what little footage we'd managed to capture before the equipment failed. Then we waited. 3 days later, Dr. Vance called. Her voice was shaking. "The samples. Jesus Christ, the samples. The soil has been altered at the atomic level. Elements that shouldn't exist in that combination. Molecular structures that shouldn't be stable. And the vegetation shows genetic modifications. Deliberate, precise changes to the DNA." What does that mean? It means something is actively modifying the environment. Not just observing. Not just passing through. Actually changing things at the most fundamental level. And if they can do this to plants and soil, they can probably do it to anything, including living animals, including humans. That thought made my blood run cold. We need to go public with this. People need to know. We will. But we need to be careful. This is going to cause panic, mass hysteria. We need to present the evidence methodically, work with authorities, make sure people understand the scope of what's happening without triggering widespread fear. But the decision was taken out of our hands 2 days later. A news crew in Billings got a tip about strange lights in the crazy mountains. They sent a helicopter up to investigate. What they captured on their broadcast camera was seen by hundreds of thousands of people live on the evening news. Multiple spheres, splitting, merging, moving in impossible patterns. All of it broadcast in high definition, undeniable and impossible to explain away. Within hours, the story went national. Then, international. Social media exploded with speculation, theories, conspiracy claims. The FAA issued statements about investigating the phenomenon. The military denied any involvement. Scientists appeared on news programs trying to offer rational explanations that nobody believed. And overnight, everything changed. The crazy mountains were closed to public access. Federal agencies moved in, establishing perimeters, conducting investigations. Talia and I were contacted by government officials who wanted to interview us, review our footage, understand what we'd experienced. We cooperated fully, showed them everything. The footage, the analysis, the samples, all of it. They were professional, thorough, and clearly concerned about what the evidence suggested. "You understand, this changes everything," one of the investigators told us. "If this is confirmed, if we determine that something is actively operating in our airspace, potentially modifying our environment, the implications are staggering." We know, I said. That's why we've been trying to document it. People need to understand what's happening. People are going to panic. We're already seeing it. UFO cults showing up at the mountain perimeter. Media circus. Conspiracy theorists claiming government cover-ups. This could spiral out of control quickly. Over the following weeks, more investigations were launched. Military aircraft monitored the airspace. Ground teams searched the mountains for physical evidence. Scientists set up monitoring stations to detect and record any future phenomena. And the spheres kept appearing. Not every night, but regularly enough that multiple official sightings were documented. Government footage, military recordings, scientific observations, all showing the same thing. Unexplained objects performing maneuvers that violated known physics. Public pressure mounted for disclosure. What did the government know? How long had this been happening? Were there other locations experiencing similar phenomena? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be provided. Dr. Vance organized a press conference, bringing together multiple witnesses and researchers to present a unified account of the phenomenon. Talia and I participated, showing our footage, describing our experiences, answering questions from journalists who ranged from genuinely curious to openly skeptical. "Do you believe these are extraterrestrial in origin?" one reporter asked. "I don't know what they are," I answered honestly. "I can only tell you what I've witnessed and documented. Something is operating in those mountains. Something with capabilities beyond our current technology. Whether it's extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or something else entirely, I can't say. But you've experienced direct interaction with these objects. They modified your equipment, altered the environment around you. That suggests intelligence, doesn't it? It suggests purpose. Whether that implies intelligence in a way we'd recognize is another question." The press conference generated more questions than answers, but it put our evidence into the public record, made it harder to dismiss or ignore. Whatever was happening in the crazy mountains, it could no longer be swept under the rug. 3 months after our first encounter, Talia and I received a call from Dr. Vance. She'd been working with an international team of scientists, analyzing all available data on the phenomenon. They'd made a discovery. "The pattern," she said. "We found the pattern. The appearances aren't random. They're following a specific sequence, increasing in frequency, building toward something." Building toward what? We don't know, but based on the progression, we estimate there will be a significant event within the next 2 weeks. Something much larger than the isolated sightings we've seen so far. How significant? Potentially visible from a wide area. Possibly multiple locations simultaneously. If our models are correct, this could be the disclosure moment everyone's been talking about. Not because governments choose to reveal information, but because the phenomenon itself becomes too large to hide. She was right. 12 days later, it happened. Simultaneously across Montana, Wyoming, and parts of Idaho, dozens of spheres appeared in the night sky, all performing the same split-merge-split pattern we'd first documented. Visible to millions of people, captured on countless cameras, recorded by news helicopters, military aircraft, amateur astronomers, and people just looking up at the sky. The spheres danced for 3 hours, moving in synchronized patterns, creating geometric formations, seemingly putting on a display. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they vanished. All of them, at exactly the same moment, gone without a trace. The next morning, the world woke up to undeniable proof that we were not alone. That something else shared our sky, demonstrated capabilities we couldn't match, and had chosen to reveal itself in a way that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Government agencies held emergency meetings. Scientists scrambled to analyze the data. Religious leaders offered interpretations. The public demanded answers that nobody had, and in the crazy mountains, where it had all started, the burned circles and modified soil remained. Physical evidence that something had been there. Something that could change our world at the molecular level. Something that was still watching. The days following the mass sighting were chaotic. Media coverage was constant, every channel showing footage of the spheres, bringing on experts who mostly admitted they had no idea what they were looking at. The internet was ablaze with theories, ranging from reasonable to completely insane. Talia and I found ourselves at the center of it. As two of the first people to document the phenomenon in detail, we were constantly being contacted for interviews, analysis, commentary. It was exhausting and overwhelming, but we felt a responsibility to share what we knew. Dr. Vance's international research team published their findings in a rushed peer review process. The paper detailed the pattern of sightings, the physical evidence collected, the modifications to equipment and environment. It was the most comprehensive scientific analysis of the phenomenon to date, and it concluded with a statement that sent shockwaves through the academic community. Based on available evidence, we can confidently state that an unknown intelligence is operating in Earth's atmosphere, demonstrating technological capabilities far beyond current human achievement. The purpose of this activity remains unknown, but the systematic and escalating nature of the interactions suggests deliberate intention rather than random occurrence. The paper was downloaded millions of times in the first week. Other research groups began publishing their own findings, creating a cascade of scientific validation. Whatever skepticism remained was being eroded by sheer volume of evidence. But not everyone was convinced. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was all an elaborate hoax, CGI fakery, government psyops designed to distract from some other agenda. Religious fundamentalists declared it was demons or angels depending on their interpretation. Skeptic organizations demanded more rigorous proof, even as that proof accumulated daily. 2 months after the mass sighting, the government finally issued an official statement. After decades of denial and dismissal, they acknowledged that unexplained aerial phenomena were real, had been documented by military personnel, and represented a potential national security concern. They announced the formation of a new agency dedicated to studying and understanding these phenomena. It was a measured, careful statement. It acknowledged reality without confirming extraterrestrial origin. It promised investigation without guaranteeing answers. But it was a start. Official recognition that something was happening. Talia and I were invited to consult with this new agency. They wanted access to our footage, our analysis, our first-hand experiences. We agreed, with the stipulation that our findings would eventually be made public. No secret files, no hidden evidence. Whatever we discovered would be shared with the world. The agency set up a research station in the Crazy Mountains, inside the exclusion zone that had been established after the mass sighting. It was a collaborative effort. Scientists, military personnel, civilians with relevant expertise. The goal was comprehensive documentation and analysis of any future phenomena. We spent 3 months at that research station, living in prefab buildings, surrounded by the most advanced monitoring equipment available, waiting for the spheres to return. And they did, regularly enough that we documented over 50 separate incidents during our time there. What we learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The spheres responded to observation. The more equipment we aimed at them, the more complex their behavior became. It was as if they knew they were being watched and wanted to demonstrate their capabilities. They'd perform increasingly intricate maneuvers, create elaborate geometric patterns, and occasionally interact directly with our monitoring equipment. Sometimes that interaction was benign. A sphere would hover near a sensor array, and we'd get readings that made no sense but didn't damage anything. Other times, equipment would be fried, just like our cameras had been on that first night. but we were learning. Slowly, carefully, we began to understand some of the patterns. The spheres appeared most frequently during certain geomagnetic conditions. They seemed to prefer specific altitudes and locations, and their split-merge behavior followed mathematical rules we were beginning to decode. Dr. Vance made a breakthrough in the 4th month. She'd been analyzing the patterns of light within the spheres, the geometric shapes that shifted and reconfigured. Using advanced computer modeling, she discovered they weren't random. They were communication, not language in any sense we'd recognize, but information transfer. The shapes and their configurations contained data, like a visual code. We couldn't fully translate it yet, but we could recognize that meaning was being conveyed. "They're trying to communicate with us," she announced at a team meeting. "Or maybe they're communicating with each other and we're just witnessing it. But this isn't random light show. This is structured information." "Can we respond?" someone asked. "I don't know. We'd need to figure out the grammar, the syntax, the underlying logic of how the information is encoded. That could take years. Or it might be impossible if their mode of thinking is too different from ours." But we tried. Dr. Vance's team created light patterns based on their best understanding of the code, projected them into the sky using powerful lasers. Simple patterns at first, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric shapes. The spheres noticed. The next time one appeared, it hovered near our laser array, seemingly observing. Then it responded, created its own patterns in answer to ours. Not patterns we'd sent, but variations on them. Acknowledging our attempt and maybe trying to teach us their language. Over the following weeks, we established a crude form of dialogue. We'd send patterns, they'd respond. Gradually, we built a vocabulary. Simple concepts at first. Yes, no, wait, observe. Then more complex ideas, location, time, purpose. It was painstaking work, fraught with misunderstanding and confusion. But progress was being made. We were communicating with something non-human, something that had been in our skies for who knows how long, and finally establishing a bridge of understanding. Then came the message that changed everything. We'd sent a pattern asking about purpose. Why are you here? What do you want? The sphere's response was complex, taking nearly 10 minutes to transmit. When Dr. Vance's team finished decoding it, the room fell silent. The translation was rough, filtered through our limited understanding of their communication method. But the essence was clear. Observation, preparation, transition approaching, assistance offered, choice required. "What the hell does that mean?" someone asked. "I think," Vance said slowly, "they're saying they've been observing us, preparing something, that some kind of transition is coming, and they're offering to help, but we need to make a choice about it." Transition to what? Choice about what? We need to ask them. We spent the next several days crafting questions, sending them into the sky, receiving responses that were simultaneously enlightening and cryptic. The spheres were patient, repeating information when we didn't understand, offering different phrasings of the same concepts. Slowly, a picture emerged. Something was changing, not just on Earth, but in the broader universe. Some kind of shift, cosmic in scale, that would affect multiple worlds. The spheres, or whatever intelligence controlled them, were monitoring this transition, studying how different species adapted to it. Earth was at a critical juncture. The transition would arrive within our lifetime, possibly within decades. How humanity responded would determine our future trajectory. The spheres were offering assistance, guidance, but only if we chose to accept it. "This is insane," one of the military liaisons said. "We're supposed to believe that aliens are here to help us with some cosmic event we know nothing about." "I'm just translating what they're sending," Dr. Vance replied. Whether we believe it or act on it is another matter. What happens if we refuse their help? I don't think they've specified. Either they don't know, or they're not willing to tell us, or we haven't figured out how to ask the right question. The findings were immediately classified, not secret in the sense of hidden from the public, but sensitive enough that controlled release was deemed necessary. Governments needed time to coordinate responses. Scientists needed time to verify and expand on the communication, and the general public needed to be prepared for information this paradigm-shifting. But word leaked, as it always does. Fragments of the communication appeared online, spreading rapidly despite government attempts to control the narrative. Within weeks, everyone knew the basics. Something was coming, the spheres were connected to it, and humanity faced some kind of choice. Public reaction was mixed. Some people welcomed the idea of alien assistance. Others feared it was a trap, some kind of manipulation. Religious groups struggled to reconcile these revelations with their beliefs. Governments argued about how to respond, whether to accept help from entities we barely understood. And through it all, the spheres kept appearing, kept communicating, kept demonstrating their presence and their capabilities. Talia and I stepped back from the front lines of research. We'd done our part, documented the phenomenon, helped establish communication. But the implications of what was happening were beyond us. This needed experts in fields we barely understood. Physicists, cosmologists, philosophers, ethicists. We returned to our photography and videography work, but everything felt different now. How do you care about capturing beautiful mountain landscapes when you know something fundamental about reality has changed? How do you focus on wildlife documentation when humanity is facing questions about its place in the cosmos? 6 months after the mass sighting, Dr. Vance called us one more time. She wanted us to come back to the research station for a special event. The spheres had communicated that they wanted to make a more direct demonstration, show us something that would clarify their message. We drove back to the crazy mountains, past the checkpoints and security perimeters, back to the place where our world had changed. The research station had grown significantly, now more small city than outpost, with hundreds of personnel working around the clock. That night, the entire team gathered outside under clear skies. The spheres appeared, dozens of them, more than we'd ever seen simultaneously. They arranged themselves in a massive geometric pattern, covering miles of sky, perfectly synchronized. Then they all split, each sphere divided into 7 smaller ones, exactly as I'd witnessed on that second encounter. Hundreds of smaller spheres now, thousands of points of light, all moving in coordinated harmony. And the lights began to change the sky itself, not just illuminating it, but altering it. The darkness between stars started to show something else. Glimpses of other places, other worlds, like someone was pulling back a curtain to reveal what lay behind the mundane reality we'd always known. For 3 hours, we watched as the spheres demonstrated the transition they'd been trying to explain, showed us how the boundaries between different layers of reality were thinning, how what we thought of as our universe was just one of many, and the walls between them were becoming permeable. The implications were staggering. Other dimensions, parallel realities, alternate versions of existence, and all becoming accessible. And humanity, like every other intelligent species in the cosmos, would have to decide how to navigate this new paradigm. When it ended, when the spheres merged back into their original forms and departed, we stood in silence, processing what we'd witnessed, understanding, finally, the magnitude of what was happening. "So, what do we do?" Talia asked quietly. "We document," I said. "We share. We help people understand. And we trust that when the time comes to make that choice, humanity will choose wisely." But I wasn't sure I believed that. Humanity had a mixed track record with major decisions. And this one, this choice about how to engage with a reality far stranger and more complex than we'd imagined, would define our species' future. The spheres still appear in the crazy mountains, still split and merge, still communicate through their light patterns. Research continues, understanding grows, and slowly, carefully, we're building a relationship with whatever intelligence operates those impossible lights. Are they extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, some form of intelligence we don't have words for? We still don't know. But they're real, they're here, and they're trying to help us prepare for something that will change everything. The transition is coming. We can feel it now, a tension in the air, a sense that the world is balanced on the edge of something momentous. How we respond, what choices we make in the coming years, will determine whether we embrace this new reality or get swept away by it. I still photograph the mountains, still document the natural world. But now I also photograph the spheres. Archive every appearance, every pattern, every communication. Because this is part of nature too, we're just finally recognizing it. And sometimes, on clear nights, Talia and I drive back to that original campsite by the Alpine Lake. We set up our cameras, now modified by forces we're only beginning to understand, and wait for the lights to appear. They usually do, and every time they split into multiple pieces and merge back together, I'm reminded of that first night, of watching something impossible become real. Of realizing that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we'd ever imagined. The split in the sky wasn't just a phenomenon to document. It was a message, a demonstration, an invitation to see reality as it truly is. Layered, complex, and full of wonders we're only beginning to discover. Whatever comes next, whatever transition we're approaching, we'll face it with open eyes. With documentation, evidence, and understanding. Because that's what we do. We witness, we record, we share, and we prepare for the moment when humanity must choose its path forward into a universe far stranger than we ever dreamed. The lights are still there, still splitting, still merging, still waiting for our answer. And we're finally learning how to respond.